mean, look, this is, thank you. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Do I do this? Good evening, and welcome to the April 18th, 2023 Board of Adjustment meeting. Due to a number of items that were postponed from last month, in addition to new applications for this month, I would like to propose splitting the agenda into two meetings. Is there someone to speak to that? A motion?
I move that we split the agenda into two meetings,
Second.
as suggested.
Okay.
Second.
So the other decision is, well, let's approve this first, and then we'll decide when we're going to have the other meeting. Okay, we'll just do a voice vote. All in favor?
If I may, Madam Chair, just to validate, we are talking about delaying old business items G and H and all new business items to a second meeting.
Right,
that
as
correct?
is, yes.
Okay,
As
thank
is reflected on here.
All right, thank you.
Yes. All in favor of having two meetings this month?
Aye.
Okay. The meetings can be proposed for, the meeting was proposed for April 25th, but it looks like we're going to have a very small group of people here. So it has been suggested by Steph and the Planning Department that we go to May 2nd. Is that going to work for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Then that
It
is
doesn't
what-
for me.
I know. I will be back.
I'll be there.
Okay. Then we can move ahead. I do have a couple of announcements. I want to welcome our two, can I welcome people first? Sure. Yeah. I want to welcome our alternates, for whom we have been waiting for a very, very long time. The alternates are M.L. Geffert and Jody Record, and we're very happy to have you.
Yes, welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, I think it's notable that in my 10-plus years of being on the Zoning Board of Adjustment, this is the first time that women have outnumbered men on the dais, and I think that's an awesome thing.
Well,
So I
thank
just
you.
would like to make
Thank you. It
know
is-
that. I mean, I don't know everyone's personal pronoun choices, but I'm presuming we're somewhere close to that. So I applaud that
Oh,
situation.
no, it is an interesting change, yes. And Jeff Matson, who had been an alternate, is now a full-fledged member, so we're happy about that. And David McDonald, who had been with us for a couple of years, has resigned from the ZBA and is taking on another project, which he's very excited about. So we want to thank him and wish him luck with that.
Applause for Mr. McDonald.
Sure, yes. Thank you, David.
If you're watching.
Okay. We do that?
Oh, we haven't done that.
Okay,
That's where we're at.
that's right. So we're going to suspend I would like a motion to suspend the rules so that we can take items out of order for postponements.
So moved?
Second.
Okay. And we're going to do this individually because of some recusals.
Okay.
Okay. So the first one is, am I going to the?
We need to vote on suspending rules.
Sorry. We need to vote on suspending the rules. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. All right, so we're postponing, and do I need to read the entire thing into the record?
I think the item number, the applicant and the address.
That's what I was thinking. Okay, the first item to be postponed is item G, the request of Jared Salmier, and I hope I haven't ruined your name, for property located at 4 Sylvester Street. Is there a motion to postpone this item?
So moved.
The intent is, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. The intent is to postpone until the May meeting?
To the May 2nd meeting?
Okay.
Yes, yes. May 2nd. Okay, all in favor?
No, I apologize. May 2nd
Second.
would be when this would normally have been heard.
No, it was going to be heard, no, that would have been heard. It would have been heard tonight.
April 25th. It would have been heard.
Right, yes.
Not tonight.
It would have been the 25th, but
Which is now the
we're changing-
2nd.
Right,
But we are not hearing it until some later point in time.
No, we're hearing it May 2nd, not on a regular.
I thought we already voted on that.
We
No,
just
because the
voted to
agendas are
suspend
listed for the
rules,
25th, Dave.
and to split the agenda. We haven't actually voted on each item to
I
postpone
see. So
them
we have
to
to-
May 2nd.
Oh,
Vote on each individual item. Oh,
okay.
Yes,
Now-
so that's why it seems as if we're moving it twice, but we
Okay.
did it in toto, and now we're
Got it.
doing it separately. So all in favor of moving the request for the 4 Sylvester Street property, say aye.
Aye.
We have a request, item H, a request to postpone the request of Cynthia, Austin Smith, and Peter, owners for property located at 9 Kent Street, to be postponed to the May 2nd meeting.
So moved.
Madam Chair, if I may, I'm Tim Phoenix. I represent the Smiths. We would like to go to the regular May meeting, if that's okay.
So the meeting of the third.
Whatever, third Tuesday of the month. Yeah,
Okay. 16th. Okay.
thank you.
So, is there a motion to postpone the Kent Street property to the meeting of the 16th of?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so new business for that. Yes, we did have this. There's never been a normal motion. New business for the May 2nd meeting. 729, 733 Middle Street condominium. Nicole Bodo and Craig Crowell. Is there a motion to postpone this to the May 2nd meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And item B under new business, the request of Peter G. Moran Trust, Peter G. Moran trustee, for property located at 170 Mechanic Street. Is there a motion to move this to the May 2nd meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, thank you.
Were there any recusals on that?
I don't think so.
I'm sorry, which case are we on? I apologize.
Item B.
70 Mechanic Street.
Okay, sorry.
Item B, new business.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Then there's new business, item C, the request of RTM Trust, Ryan T. Mullen and Heidi E.K. trustees, owners, for property located at 250 Odeon Point Road.
So
To be
moved.
moved. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Item D under new business, the request of Sherry A. Holmes, Yvonne Goldsberry, for property located at 45 Richmond Street. Is there a motion to move this to the May 2nd meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And item E, the request of 45 Rockingham Street LLC for property located at 45 Rockingham Street to be moved to the May 2nd meeting. Is there a motion? Is there, yeah.
Madam Chair, point of order. I precautionarily will say that I'm going to recuse myself from this vote. I hadn't looked closely at all these applications, but for the moment, I'm going to
Okay.
recuse from this vote.
Okay, thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And
I'll
you
recuse
are
myself,
recused on
yes.
this. That's F, the request of Bucephalus LLC owner for property located at 650 Maplewood Avenue. Is there a motion to
So moved.
postpone? Thank you.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And G, the request of Kate Street Development LLC for property located at 360 US Route 1 bypass.
So moved.
Thank you, Tom.
Second.
Thank you, Paul. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. All right,
There we go.
so, just to let you all know that each petitioner is given 15 minutes to speak. If they feel that they're going to need more than that, please talk to the board before you start your presentation, and we will vote to see if that can be approved. It's 5 minutes per speaker, 2 for or against. Okay? And with that, we have the approval of the minutes of the March 2 sets of minutes tonight. Approval of the minutes for the March 21st, 2023 meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Paul. Second?
Madam Chair, I apologize. I have corrections.
You don't have to apologize. That's okay. What would you like to correct?
Yes, thank you. So on page 2 of the minutes, about middle of the page, under Roman numeral 2, old business, there's the italicized paragraph starting with Mr. Rayon moved not to recuse himself from the PL. That really doesn't capture the essence properly of what was taking place. It can be reworded to indicate that Mr. Rayon asked for an informal vote of the board on whether or not he should recuse himself from the appeal, and that that 3 members indicated that he should not, and Mr. Mantle and Vice Chair Margerson felt that he should recuse. Something to that effect, if the minutes could be updated to reflect that. On page 4 of the minutes, again, about the middle of the page.
Recording in progress.
Good, I didn't see it.
There's a paragraph that begins, Vice Chair Margerson referenced, page 32. The second to last sentence of that says, starts with he said he couldn't find anything in the zoning ordinance that was tied to it and thought it wasn't something that the zoning ordinance should be reviewing. The word ordinance should be changed to the zoning board. And then further down in more of a grammatical, but page 6, the first non-italicized paragraph, it says, Mr. Rayon said the paragraph pointed towards the wetlands cup. Kind of sounds like a competition or a race or something like that, but it's the wetlands, should be all capitalized,
Okay.
CUP for conditional use permit. That's all I have for corrections. Thank you.
I had a few as well. On page 7, in the last paragraph, in the lower half, it says, he said he thought, however, that the property was underutilized and suggested stipulations requiring that 1 or 2 more offices be used. Remove the word 2, so 1 or more offices. And on page 10, under decision of the board, the first non-italicized paragraph, after UC Technical Advisory Committee abbreviated, it says, and due to the wetlands, comma, buffers, it should read wetlands buffer. And then later at the end of that sentence, it says, and now met the required variance, but it should read, and now required the variance.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Are there any other changes? Okay.
Oh, sorry, I have one more.
Okay.
Oh, wait, is this is the March 29th
It
minutes,
is.
so we'll deal with
This
that
is
next.
this is the 20, yes, this is the 21st right now. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? I believe you.
Yes.
A second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Okay. Now, the March 29th, 2023 minutes.
I'll make my comment. On page 5 of those, the first paragraph, first sentence, it says at the end of the sentence, and that he didn't think granting them would be contrary, but it should say granting the variances.
Okay. Any other changes, amendments? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Abstain.
Abstains,
Okay.
not being
Thank you.
present.
All right.
I'm sorry, that was Mr. Rossi and Mr. Rayo.
And Mr.
I
Raymond.
wasn't
Okay,
present for
just wanted to make sure.
Okay. The first item of business is old business B. The request of 635 Sagamore Development LLC owner for a property located at 635 Sagamore Avenue, whereas relief is needed to remove existing structures and construct 4 single-family dwellings, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.513 to allow 4 freestanding dwellings where 1 is permitted. 2, a variance from section 10.521 to allow a lot area per dwelling unit of 21,198 square feet per dwelling unit, where 43,560 square feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 222, Lot 19, and lies within the Single Residence A District.
Thank you, Madam.
Do you just want to? Sorry, I just want to note that Mr. Rossi and Mr. Rayum have recused from this
themselves.
discussion.
Thank you, Steph. Madam Chairman, members of the board, I'm Tim Phoenix from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts. My client is 635 Sagamore Development, LLC. With apologies to the board and to the neighbors who have shown up tonight, last month we continued this because we had a short board. I think there was only 5 members sitting on it. We all thought that was going to be remedied for this month because we have 2 new alternate board members. Unfortunately, since that time, a couple of things have happened. One is Member McDonald resigned, meaning one of the alternates is taking his place, and as you see, 2 members have recused themselves. So I learned yesterday that we only have 6 members.
Right.
Normally, I would probably go with 6 members. If I was doing, a front porch expansion or didn't have a lot of opposition, I would just go with it. But this is a large project, an ambitious project for my client. There's a lot of neighborhood opposition. So my client wants to get, on the odds, the best chance he can, which is 7 members. Because the 4 out of 7 is a better ratio than 4 out of 6. So I requested a continuance today, having only learned about this yesterday. I was contacted by the staff, and I appreciate it, asking, do you really want to continue? Because we don't know how long we're only going to have 6 members. And my response to that is, I don't either, but having only one day for my client to consider whether he wants to go forward with 6 members really isn't enough. So we requested the continuance, which, if granted, will give us time to analyze whether to come with 6 members or wait. In addition, anticipating that it wouldn't be an issue for this board, I notified one of the lead members of the opposition that I wouldn't be presenting tonight. So out of fairness to them, some of them are here, not as many as were here last time, so some may have not come because of my message to the members. So I don't feel like I can go forward. So I would ask that you grant us a continuance. We'll decide in the interim whether to come back next month with 4. If not, we will likely withdraw it and then figure out what we want to do, and maybe he waits for 3 months to see if the city council can appoint some new members, or maybe he decides to go forward. If the board is uncomfortable with a continuance to next month under those circumstances, then I would respectfully withdraw it now, and then we have our options what to do later.
Okay, I want to say 2 things. Both of our alternates, Jody and ML, are seated on this, so you will be voting. And are there any questions for Attorney Phoenix?
I'm going to say that only because you had notified the member of the opposition that this would not go forward tonight and they're not here, that would be the only ground for which I would vote to postpone this. We have had 3 postponements on this application. And the reality is, I mean, given how long it took us to get our 2 new alternates, and no disrespect to anybody, but I think it's highly unlikely that we'll get a 7th member anytime soon. My personal feeling is to allow you to go until the next month, and then if you don't go forward, to withdraw.
That is entirely fair.
But I out of real respect for the neighbors here, they've come time and time again.
Agreed.
So, and
I would have given them more notice if I had had more notice, but we've learned about this, we all learned about this, I think, yesterday afternoon or something.
I mean, those are
Certainly
my
yesterday.
thoughts. I don't know anybody else's thoughts, so.
Any other questions?
I'll just comment that I was inclined to not postpone it tonight, but upon hearing that the neighbors were not necessarily aware that they were being heard tonight, it's influenced my decision to lean more towards allowing it to be postponed again. Even though I don't think that we'll have a full board anytime soon, and the 2
That's very
recusals will
likely.
continue. Yeah.
He may decide to go forward with 6, but he wants to mull it over and give it some thought more than 24 hours. That's sort of what's behind it. So if you grant it, I appreciate the consideration.
Yeah, so, Tim, you notified the people from,
I notified one of them, the one for whom I had contact information, and he is here.
yeah, so my thought is that, yeah, to postpone it. We've had this before that was postponed at the meeting with a lot more people sitting in the audience because they all thought it was going on. So, I have to agree with Councilor Phoenix's interpretation that he notified Tide Watch, and obviously some people were notified and some weren't, so.
I'm sorry, the public doesn't get to speak to this. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Does anybody want to make a motion, have further discussion?
I'll make the motion to postpone to the May 2nd meeting.
The regularly scheduled, no?
Are regularly scheduled?
Yeah, the regularly, May 16th is the regularly scheduled meeting.
May 16th, thank you.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion? If not, I will take a roll call vote. Jeff?
Yes.
Jody?
Yes.
ML? Yep. Paul?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Thank you for your consideration, and again, apologies to the board and to the neighbors who have had to come out time and again.
Thank you. We agree.
Madam Chair, if I may, before you get on to the next matter, which is also mine, I want to raise a general point of order, just so everybody's covered. When the board moved G through the new business to May 2nd, my experience has been, I would defer to legal and the staff, but my experience has been that when you've got a scheduled meeting scheduled and you before that meeting continue something to some other time, someone has to show up on April 25th, wherever the meeting's going to be, to inform people who show up that don't know it's been moved. That is what I've seen boards do in the past, for whatever that's worth.
Okay.
I'll make sure that we're covered.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Item B, the rehearing of the request of Jeffrey M. and Melissa Foy, owners, for property located at 67 Ridges Court. Whereas relief is needed for construction of a 518-square-foot garage addition and expansion of front dormer, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow a 14-foot front yard where 19 feet is required per section 10.516.10.2. A variance from section 10.321 to allow a nonconforming building or structure to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 207, Lot 59, and lies within the Single Residence B District. And before we get started, I'm going to allow the alternates. I'm going to invite them by alphabetical order. So, ML, you'll be sitting on this one first, okay?
Okay,
Jody,
great.
next one is yours.
Madam Chair, point of order, just as a reminder, our zoning board of adjustment rules and regulations do allow alternates, even if they're not voting members, to ask questions
Oh, yes.
of the applicant. However, once the public hearing is closed, they cannot provide further
Yes,
input.
we reviewed that with them prior to the
Okay,
meeting.
perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, go ahead, Mr. Phoenix.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. Again, with some apologies, we've got another one that's got a bit of a thorny history. There's two parts to this. I guess I want some guidance from the board and Steph, and I'll go through this history of it in a moment. And 15 minutes should do it for the first part, maybe 20 for the second. And the two issues are that this matter was, we brought in a matter last summer, which was denied. It was not appealed. Mr. Foy then brought a new application through me with a reduced scope project. The board denied that and didn't let us get to the merits on the basis of Fisher v. Dover. But in the vote on the Fisher v. Dover, Mr. McDonald, who had previously recused himself, voted. So I dealt with the staff and wrote a letter, and it turns out that his vote should not have been counted. And the rules say that on a 3-3 tie, you get the rehearing, which is what this board has eventually granted. So the question I have is, am I going through Fisher v. Dover analysis again first, or am I going to the merits now?
It is my understanding that you are going to the merits now. Is that true, Mr. Mantle?
I would have,
Okay, I'm going to let someone go ahead.
I would have said that this would be your, when the first time you brought the reworked application and the board denied hearing it, Fisher v. Dover, that's where you're at right now. Because you're bringing back the same application,
Yeah, I'm happy that
right?
that's fine. I just,
That is my understanding, but
Okay.
I'm open to other interpretations
Okay.
of the
I'm sorry, what's your understanding?
that you are starting new with the same application, so if you feel Fisher v. Dover should be discussed, now would be the time to
okay.
discuss
Then why
it.
don't I just proceed in that fashion? That does make sense to me. I discussed it some with Trevor in the legal department. I think his thinking was as yours, but the way the rehearing notice was worded, it kind of looked like the merits.
Absolute, right.
So,
Right.
all right, so let me launch into that. So, again, many of you lived through this since last summer. You new folks, and maybe David wasn't here for all of it. I think he may have been here for round 2. But originally, we brought relief to put an addition on the Foy's home on 67 Ridgers Court, which is the last house on the left before you get to Little Harbor. That addition was 718 square feet of area and encompassed 2 garage bays with living space and a deck above it. The request for relief that we needed expansion relief, and we needed relief because the front of our new addition was 15.8 feet from the property line, where the existing house is 13.5, but the requirement, we thought at the time, was 30 feet. That matter was denied by this board for reasons that I still question, but didn't appeal, so I've lost on that one, primarily based upon comments about being in the wetland buffer and lack of hardship. Rather than appeal that, and that faced fairly significant neighborhood opposition. So rather than appeal it, the Foys decided to relook at the project and thus came up with the reduced scope project, trying to take into consideration the primary concerns of the neighbors, which was a couple of neighbors' view sheds from their houses across the street were lessened by the new building. So we made the building smaller and reduced it to 518 square feet, so a 200 square foot reduction, feeling that that's a significant change. The other thing that happened was that I missed it to begin with and didn't catch it. In fact, I think Peter Stith caught it after the first hearing, that we don't need relief from a 30-foot setback, but because of averaging, we only need 19 feet. So another significant change to the second project was we needed 13.5 feet where 19 is required, or a 3.5 foot, roughly 3.5 foot difference versus 14.5 feet previously. So when we were here before, the board denied it. My interpretation, after reading the minutes, some of which I've cited in my submission on the Fisher v. Dover matter, was that some members, notably Mr. Mantle, felt that the requirement, that the ask was the same. In other words, we need the same distance from the lot line that in the second application that we did in the first. I would note that, by the way, I would note that the staff report notes that the staff believes that Fisher v. Dover does not preclude us. Of course, it's your decision in the long run, but that was their position. The other thing is that way back in August, when we were considering the first one, there was talk about the changes that needed to be made, and Mr. Stith advised the board that it's the changes to the project, not the changes to the nature of relief. The nature of the relief we need is still the same now as it was in the larger project, but the project itself has been greatly reduced. And I've outlined in my Fisher v. Dover analysis some of those changes. And the law essentially is that a new application can be considered if it's materially differs in nature and degree from its predecessor, or if it's invited or addresses concerns of the board previously raised, and I've cited the cases for that. So what we're asking this board to do is let us go forward with a new on the merits hearing by finding that the changes that have been made are sufficient enough and or address concerns expressed by the board to go forward. So those changes including, and they're outlined in my memo, and you've got a few memos. So the one I'm referring to is my memo dated back in December of 2022. I've since cited supplemental memorandums, but we've reduced the footprint by 200 square feet, which is 27.9% reduction. We've reduced the square footage of addition in the setback from 450 square feet when we thought it was a 30-foot setback to 68 square feet, which is 84% reduction from what we asked for and was denied. We reduced the garage from 2 bays to 1 bay, which is 50% less. We've reduced the variance relief from, as I just mentioned, about 15 feet where 30 was required to 14 and a 14.2 feet deviation to 15.8 feet where 19 is required, a 3.2 feet difference. We've reduced lot coverage, which was originally 26.6%. It went down to 25.1% with the larger application and has now been reduced to 23%. And the reason for the reductions is that there's a large paved area to the parking area to the right side of the existing home. Much of that is coming out. And because right now the old and the new addition are over existing pavement, so we don't have to count that as new impervious, it's already impervious. And if we move the building back to the required 19 feet, a couple things happen. One is we're increasing impervious, we're getting the building closer to Little Harbor, putting more of it in the buffer, and I would submit that a 3.5 foot move back of this addition is not going to really change much the view sheds of the neighbors, but we wouldn't be here. And the reason we're here is because we also have to have the addition sort of match up, line up with the rest of the house. If you move it too far back, you've got all these odd angles and rooms don't match up. We've improved 46 and 56 rigid court views to Little Harbors. That was Exhibit 6 to that, where John Shagnon, who is here, showed the original view sheds and then showed the changes of them. You have to kind of compare them, but the view sheds got better, which is one of our goals given the concerns of the neighbors. And we've decreased the square footage in the wetland buffer by 200 square feet and increased the distance from Little Harbor. So I also put before you and took a look at other cases that we could find in the fairly recent past where Fisher v. Dover has been acknowledged. I had a case before the board in 2015 where a client on Broad Street had proposed a 4-unit condominium with an old farmhouse, big house, back house, little house, barn. The board denied the 4. We came back with 3 and they approved it. It was a 25% reduction. In 2016, I was before the board over at the end of Ocean Road for Tuck Realty for 23 townhouses. We reduced that to 18, which is a 21% reduction, and the board allowed the second one to go forward. This was not mine. Susan McDonald in 2017 declined to invoke Fisher v. Dover to prohibit a first-floor addition in the yard setback after a previous first-floor addition had been denied several years earlier. The board noted that the addition was more centered than before and would have lesser impact on abutting owners, and that's what we believe we have here. And then finally, the application of Nila LLC in 2022 wanted to redevelop an existing garage as a dwelling unit, even though it had been denied on density and yard setback relief previously. The changes to the ordinance, coupled with the elimination of upward expansion and neighborhood support, resulted in determining that Fisher v. Dover did not prohibit us from going forward. So, as I mentioned, I won't go through all of the specific comments in the minutes. You've had the minutes. Many of you were here. I would urge the board to consider that these changes are significant enough under Fisher v. Dover. The case law says it has to be material, but it's not to be rigidly applied. And I think it would be unfair to the Foys, after they've made an effort to address the concerns of this board and the neighbors by reducing their garage from two-car garage to one-car garage with these other attendant benefits compared to previously. So we would ask that the board permit us to proceed under Fisher v. Dover. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, as would Jeff and John, on that issue.
So the revised application removes one garage bay, and that accounts for the 200 square foot reduction, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but the application still has the traditional living space with the master bedroom, a living space, a rear deck, and trellis. They've just moved it to the back of the
The deck and
house.
trellis are moved to the back. The living space is still there because that area was a garage bay with a deck over it.
Okay. And that was because in the planning department comments, it did say on the original plan there was a deck, but there is a deck in this application.
Yeah, the deck was on top of the portion that the neighbors couldn't see through before, so.
And so what is being added to the building has just been shifted around. It hasn't been reduced besides the one garage bay.
No, that's not correct. The whole garage bay that was a building, that's gone.
But instead of two garages, you're having one garage.
Right, but
Okay.
one entire bay is gone. It's not moved somewhere else.
That I understand.
Talk.
I just want to make one comment, because that's a good question.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, Jeff Foy, I'm the property owner at 67 Regis Court. The deck area is significantly smaller in this proposed addition than what was in the prior application, the original application. The square footage of the deck is 20% of what it previously was. It's a very, very small area compared to the original application.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
So one of the dimensions you mentioned, Attorney Phoenix, was, and you went a little fast. So what went from 450 feet to 68 feet?
The square footage of the addition in the identified setback. Now, remember, originally, we thought when we came in last August that the setback was 30 feet. So you had significantly more of the building between 19 and 30. So honestly, it should have been a request for 19 feet back then, but we didn't know it. So what the board was considering is, how big is this thing? Where is it located compared to where it should be? And that was, we proposed that it should be 30 feet. So that's the 450. And because it's only 19 now, and because that bay has been removed, it's reduced to 68 square feet.
Okay. But and just one more question.
Sure.
I remember the first application, and it still is, the current primary front yard is 8 feet. And with this addition, you're actually enlarging your setback from.
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
the front setback is 8 feet to an entry steps.
Yes.
It's about, I think it's 13 and a half to the main face of the main building, and now we're at 15.8.
Yeah, so, I mean, I remember for myself, when we were first doing this, that the fact that it was becoming more in conformity with the zoning ordinance was not a problem for me. I denied the variance, but, we're still, so even though it's a reduction, it's still an improvement in the primary front yard setback, so,
It is, by both distance and area within it.
all right, that's it. Thank you.
Other questions for Attorney Phoenix? Okay.
If the board wishes to.
If I may just ask if there's anything Jeff or John wants to add to this part? I guess not.
Okay. Yes.
Attorney Phoenix. Just for success. My objection, I still feel, Fisher v. Dover applies. And the reason I feel that way is after going through the first application and when everybody was here, they brought up, as you brought up tonight, the wetlands and the diminution of value. I'm not disputing Mr. Stanhope and the real estate agent that you've added to the packet tonight. What I am disputing is the fact that in all this time, you could have easily gone to Roseanne and asked as far as what those houses are assessed, how they're assessed, so on and so forth, and how they would be in effect. And that would clear it up right away. Because you have, like you said, as you rightly would, that there is no diminution of value, whereas the people across the street says there is. To what degree, that's open to debate. That was one of the objection, and it fails. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. The second one is the wetlands, which the two-car garage, now the one-car garage, is wholly in the wetlands. And that was an issue as well. Granted, we don't have that purview, but again, putting something in wetlands would be contrary to public interest. In that intervening time, you could have easily gone to the Conservation Commission and eliminated that. So those two items, for me, are still on the table, Fisher v. Dover.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate your candor and your letting me address it. I disagree wholeheartedly with your analysis. First of all, taking them in reversed order, the wetland is not in your purview. That's a planning board issue. We're not asking for a variance from anything that you folks are looking at with respect to the wetlands. So I respectfully suggest that you can't use someone else's purview as a reason to apply your public interest test here, because that's not before you. Turning to the diminution in value, we have a respected appraiser, Peter Stanhope, who opined that the neighbor's property will not be diminished in value under the larger project. I didn't have him redo it because it's a smaller project. You also have the opinion of our realtor, Robin Valeri, who made the same analysis. You also had Jeff Foy, who testified at an earlier hearing that he did check with the city and found that, and I'll have him repeat it here if necessary, and he found that those other properties are not taxed higher because of a view. His property is. And Robin Valeri's letter, the realtor's letter, outlines that. I can find it for you if you like. And I think that Jeff's taxes are about $26,000 and Ms. Thompson across the street is about $11,000. Jeff, if you want to confirm what I've just said.
Sure. Mr. Mantle, thank you for bringing that up, because I did want to address this. I rewatched the hearing from 8 months ago, and I remember those comments that night. I did go to the city assessor's office to ask that very question.
After the meeting.
After the meeting, as you had suggested.
Yeah.
Yep, and I did. And I spoke to Chuck Reese, and we went through several examples, and he assured me that no property tax is being paid by the folks, across the street that have a view of the water across my property. They are not paying additional property tax for that. And one of the reasons that he cited was the fact that it would be very hard for them to administer that, because it could change dramatically with landscaping and whatnot, so that they do not do it. They have a delineation, like when you look at the tax card, there's a 3-letter abbreviation that's on there. Code, thank you. But that they don't actually, doesn't apply to the valuation.
Did you ask to see whether you have a valuation for your water view?
I did, and I do.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm waterfront, right.
Yeah.
Okay. And just one other comment I wanted to make, as it respects the tidal buffer zones, there's a 100-foot tidal buffer zone and there's a 50-foot tidal buffer zone. I'm not sure of the origins of those or why they were specifically chosen. It seems like round numbers to me, but I don't know. But one of the things that I think is important is the further we go back with the addition, the closer we get to the 50-foot tidal buffer zone. So whatever we do is better, I believe would be better environmentally if we're closer to Ridges Court and thus further away from the tidal buffer zone, because the tidal buffer zone goes at an angle because of the property's angle, the waterfront is angle. All right. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Shagnon. I guess Mr. Shagnon wants to add something.
If I might, yeah, thank you for bringing up the Conservation Commission. I believe at the hearing in August or so, the first hearing, the board discussed at length after the closing of the public hearing issues related to the Conservation Commission. And so I apologize for not bringing it up earlier, but the Conservation Commission is not the place to go to before this board renders a decision. And the classic example of that is if the building wants to be, get relief to be closer to the front of the property, thereby being further away from the resource, this board needs to make that decision first. If the board would choose not to allow that, then when you go to the Conservation Commission, you can say that the building has to be further back, closer to the resource, because the variance was not granted. So this is the first place that needs to have that adjudication. Secondly, the Conservation Commission looks primarily at impact on the ground. And as mentioned, there exists now a surface coverage, a paved area that will be taken up by a building. So the impact in the buffer is less with the building than the amount of pavement that's there now. Also, having parking areas that are not covered that allow cars to sit and have oil drips, whatever, drain into the resource are not as favorable as having covered garage spaces. So I think we're at the right board to start.
There is no batting lineup of land use boards. You chose to come here first as opposed to the Conservation Commission. I understand that, and that's the preference of a lot of people. As far as Mr. Stanhope goes, who I've used, he's very good. When valuating my property in 2017, he came up with a value that was 2/3 less than the city assessment. So that's debatable. But
Are there other questions for the petitioner?
Yeah, I just have a couple other things to respond to Mr. Mannel's. We rely on Peter Stanhope's, he's a well-respected, as Mr. Mannel identified. We have had a second one. I will also mention that the opposition through Attorney Durbin's office presented an opinion of a realtor that estimated, I believe, if memory serves, an $800,000 to $1 million reduction in value, which on our analysis, the property probably is worth somewhere around 1.2, 1.3, given the increase in value. So that just didn't make sense to us. The other thing is that the pavement that John's talking about coming up is, if you remember, it's a big circular thing, and it's much closer to the resource, to Little Harbor, and we're taking all that out. In fact, this new proposal puts a new sort of strip, a driveway strip of porous pavement in there, further reducing the impervious coverage. And then finally, we talked about this at the first hearing, not at the second, because we didn't get that far, but as we pointed out, people don't have a right to a view. People who view something nice, in this case the harbor, over someone else's property are always on notice that somebody's going to put something there, whether it's a building or trees or whatever it might be, that may affect their view. So again, I implore the board to consider the fact that the Foys have listened to the board previously and listened to the neighbors and have tried to come up with something that they think is a compromise that they can live with, but still tries to address those concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone to speak to for, or is there anyone to speak in favor of this petition?
This is only about, with regard to.
We're doing Fisher v. Dover.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
So it's just
I
us.
just, yeah.
Yep.
I'm so sorry.
So,
So what would you like to do?
I've been sitting here quietly, but in my opinion, we've mixed a lot of the merits of the application with the Fisher v. Dover analysis. And I would like to say that with regard to Fisher v. Dover, when this case was first heard before the board, the only thing that gave me pause with regards to the variance was the community objection to the obstructed view and the, it was a pretty high level of objection, not just from one person, but from a number of people. And the revised plan is substantively different in that particular regard. And so, in my opinion, it is not prohibited from rehearing based on Fisher v. Dover. That's the opinion I had last time we discussed it, and I maintain that opinion.
And just to clarify the question, so the decision before us right now is whether, and to quote from Fisher v. Dover, what has been presented with a 518 square foot addition is a significant enough, and I believe the term is material in Fisher v. Dover, change from the original application such that this isn't a retread. This is effectively a new application that may be heard by the board. So it's an up or down vote on that.
Yes.
Yes.
And,
Correct.
and then we can get to the merits.
Yes.
Yes.
And as I understand what the applicant is saying, the reduction in square feet is the primary difference. And again, we really have to focus not on what the public or the neighbors think, but really what's the change. And the one thing that I also think is involved is the overall impervious surface is going to, as compared to the original plan, is going to be reduced. What I'm not clear about is whether the applicant is proposing to reclaim all of the impervious outside of where the garage is, so that all that pavement is going to go away and it's going to be replaced by pervious in the second application, just to be clear?
If I understand your question correctly, right now, I don't know if Steph can get it up there. There's been so many applications, I know. If you can find John Shagnan's. So, I'm sorry, I have to walk over to it. I've got bad eyes.
John should know. It's really where the pavement is now, is all that pavement being taken up and replaced with soil and shrubbery and grass and pervious?
I don't know if I can be heard, but.
Well, bring your mic with you.
It's all impervious now. That's being taken up in this rectangular area. Is being replaced.
Tim, can you
Bring the
grab the
mic.
mic?
Yeah.
People at home can't
Or
hear
John,
you.
you can, I don't care. I just want confirmation on the record. Honestly, what I'm looking for is a statement that says that with the new plan, the amount of pervious surface that's going to be restored is greater than what would have been restored under the prior plan. In other words, I'm looking for not only the new plan reduces the total square footage, it also takes down the level, so you're not as high, and then what does it do to the pervious-impervious surface balance?
The answer is that the reduced proposal will result in the removal of more impervious surface, replacing it with.
Say it one more time.
Sure.
Because that's important to me in terms of the material difference question, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm pushing.
The revised proposal will remove more impervious surface.
Thank you. So again, to summarize, Tim, your changes are the square footage of the addition is reduced by 300 square feet?
200.
200, I'm sorry, math is, 200 square feet. You're removing more impervious surface, and your overall height is reduced.
The height, did you say?
Yeah, because you had a deck over that other bay.
That whole, not the
That's all
overall height of the
gone.
building.
It's just gone. I apologize.
It's
all gone.
moved, and that bay is gone. So on the numbers in my submission previously, right now, impervious coverage on the lot is 26.6%. The old application, which had the 718 square foot addition, reduced that to 25.1%. And the new one reduces it to 23%. So on an overall basis, we've gone down by 3.6% from what's there today, or an 8% reduction from what we proposed last summer and what we're proposing now.
Okay, thank you. Again, my focus, Madam Chair, is just to get the differences.
We can all benefit, absolutely.
Helped me.
Are there any other differences that we're omitting? So your square footage is smaller, you're restoring more pervious, and yeah, that's it.
Fair questions, especially for people who are just getting to this. The rest of them had to slog through it for months now. So in my submission, there's several ways you can look at this. Those are two. We're also reducing the garage bays from 2 to 1. That's a 50% reduction. As Ms. Margison asked me about the 450 square feet of the original addition was in the setback when we applied for 15.8 with a 30-foot setback. It turns out we didn't need 30 feet, so we've realized that, and now it's 19. So on the numbers, the feet of setback is 3.5 feet instead of 14 feet, which we thought was also a material change.
Okay.
Lot covered. And we've reduced to the extent possible we increased the view sheds from the two closest neighbors across the street. John Shagnon had done view sheds, and obviously if you have a shorter building and you're across the street, you're going to see more of the harbor than you did with the larger building. And again, pardon me for repeating, but at 15.8, where 19 is required, if we moved it back to 19, I don't have the view sheds, but my head tells me that you're not going to gain a whole lot of additional view from a 3.5 foot pushback of the existing addition. And again, the reason for the request is that so everything can line up better interior-wise.
Thank you. I just really want to know the differences. So I think you've laid it out, and we now have to consider whether that's material in terms of Fisher v. Dover.
Yes, thank you.
So I do believe Fisher v. Dover applies because this is not a use that materially differs in nature and degree from its predecessor. It is smaller. It has one less garage bay, but it still is for the deck, the trellis, the living space is the same as the previous application. I do not, it's for a use that materially differs in nature and degree from its predecessor, and I don't believe that the new revised
Well, if I may,
application does.
it's not only a use, as you were advised by Mr. Stith earlier, you have to look at the project. The deck and the trellis don't need any relief now. So they should not be in consideration at all. What should be in consideration is the other changes that are material, at least as evidenced by the cases I've cited, and the other applications that we found that, they're not the same, but they give some guidance as to what this board, maybe not this particular group of members, but what the board has done in the past with projects that have been denied and then came back. And they've been, 25% reduction in units has been approved. This is a 50 of bays. So I respectfully submit that You don't look at, and this is why, what I was respectfully trying to say about Mr. Mannel's previous position, which is that the nature of the relief, which is setback of 15.8 feet from the property line, is the same, but the project is respectfully markedly different. If I haven't convinced you, I tried.
Madam Chair, point of order. Are we debating amongst the board, or are we asking questions of the applicant's representative? Because right now, it sounds like the applicant's representative is a member of the board, which I'm a little concerned about.
Well,
I
I
think that's
did ask him questions because I needed him to clarify.
I understand, but we're currently seem to be debating, and the applicant's representative appears to be a member of the board, and I'm concerned about that, so.
That's a very valid point. Thank you.
well, if I may, I'm answering questions as they're asked, so that's what I'm trying to do, so.
Okay, I didn't ask a question. So, but as speaking to the board, Fisher v. Dover applies in two circumstances.
Again, Madam Chair, are we debating amongst the board? Have we finished with questions of the applicant?
No, questions for okay.
Thank you.
Wasn't sure.
Yeah, I wasn't asking Tim
Okay.
questions. So, but when a material change of circumstances affecting the merits of the application has not occurred, that is one instance in which Fisher v. Dover applies. Or the application is not for a use that materially differs in nature and degree from its predecessor. The Board of Adjustment may not lawfully reach the merits of the petition. My determination of this is that this fits into the second part of the Fisher v. Dover analysis. So I would find that Fisher v. Dover applies.
Yes, I'll just add for my comments. Something that previously swayed me and still does, it relates to Board Member Tom's comment. In fact, the neighbors' opinions don't dictate our decisions or anything, but something that I found notable was they weren't just random changes to the project. The changes specifically addressed the neighbors' concerns, like reducing it from 2 car to 1 car enhanced the view of the neighbors, even though there is no obligation to in terms of view sheds. So I found that to be a material different change.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
Madam Chair, thank you. And not to belabor this too much further, I think we've had plenty of discussion on this. I guess the one other fact that we haven't really talked about is the change in the front setback from 30 feet to 19 feet. That is a substantial change in my mind. I would think it would be a slam dunk from a Fisher v. Dover perspective if it was in fact a change in the ordinance since the first presentation. This board has had that in the past where an applicant has come before us and said, look, I presented at this point in time, the ordinance has now changed. That has materially affected my application. I think that's a pretty winning argument. In this case, it is a provision of the ordinance that was there. That said, it's kind of an odd provision where you have to go out to your neighbor's properties and start measuring setbacks and do calculations, probably work with planning staff to validate those calculations. It is an odd aspect to our zoning ordinance. There's really nothing else quite like it in the zoning ordinance, where you kind of get to sort of say, hey, I don't need to meet the full requirements of the ordinance because my neighbors don't meet the full requirements of the ordinance. Because of the odd nature of that provision and the fact that the applicant has now come to realize that provides them some additional relief from this board, in my mind, that is an aspect that is a substantial change to the application. Is it a winning one in the sense that the application should be approved? I can't say that for certain, but I will say that it's sufficient enough in my mind that we should at least hear the application on its revised merits. Thank you.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that the applicant has provided a revised plan that reflects material changes in the circumstances affecting the merits of the application, and therefore is entitled to a rehearing by this board under the standard articulated by Fisher v. Dover.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'm going to decline to second that, even though I agree with her, because that's what we did last time, and we failed to get the required 4 votes to pass it. And in retrospective analysis, Mr. Rayum pointed out that it would be more typical to have a motion to invoke Fisher v. Dover than a motion to affirm a negative finding or something. I don't know exactly how you phrase it, but it was something along those lines. Sure.
I will defer
We're
to
different
Nope.
people.
Well, Madam Chair, I'll just clarify that, and I appreciate you bringing up my words. Historically, in my experience in 10 years-ish on the board, that was how we treated it. That said, reviewing the guidebook for boards of adjustment, it's really not entirely clear what you're supposed to do in these instances. In retrospective, perhaps a motion like has been made by Ms. Gifford is appropriate. The one concern would be is if it fails, and how I think that we didn't do a great job last time is if it fails, we can't just say, oh, it failed and not talk to why the motion failed and provide the applicant a better understanding of our thoughts on Fisher v. Dover. So it's up to you, Madam Chair, how you want to proceed, but I didn't want the board necessarily to take my advice as gospel on this. It just was how the board's dealt with it in the past. I think the actual guidance to the board, from what I did for research, is a little less clear.
Okay.
It's a positive motion either way.
So just to clarify, based on the standard of material change in the circumstances affecting the merits of the application articulated by Fisher v. Dover, I'm moving that this application be reheard by the board, and I should articulate for the motion's purposes based on the reduction in square
Can you hold that
footage.
thought till we get a second?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, oh, that's not my home, oh, I see, that's supporting
Just-
the motion. So that's
Okay.
it. Move to rehear based on Fisher v. Dover
And
and
then you
the
will
criteria.
get to make sure we want to go forward with this. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, in the interest of moving this forward, I will second.
Thank you. Okay, would you like to fill out your motion?
No, all I want to say is the basis for making the motion are the following, which I consider to be material changes in the circumstances affecting the application, which are the reduction in square footage, the increase in pervious surface, the limitation of setback incursion, the increase of view sheds. And I would also say that, based on the applicant's presentation, a change in the neighbor's response to this application, although that bears further inquiry.
Okay,
Nothing further with my second, Madam Chair.
thank you. Okay, is there further discussion before I call for a vote? When this came around last time, I did not vote to go forward with it. I thought it met the Fisher v. Dover. But I have had a lot of months to mull this over. And I listened to the petitioner and to my fellow board members, and I feel that I can support this motion. So if there are no further discussions, then I'm going to start with ML.
I vote yes.
Paul?
No.
Beth?
No.
Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Yes.
Jeff? And I vote yes. So you may go ahead. Okay. Now,
Shall I proceed?
Yes,
I don't think you need to
please.
read it again. Just as a reminder, which I forgot to say, I'm glad for those of you who did voted the way you do, because what I forgot to do at the beginning, and I may need 20 minutes here.
I was going to remind you, yes.
Is that since the application that was originally denied, we have added a small additional one, which is for a dormer on the front of the house, which would not be subject to Fisher v. Dover because it's new, so I thought, I'm going to have to get up and stand up while we hear that one. So now I can do it all at once, so I'll just start with that. I don't know if Steph can bring up the most recent plan was submitted on March 7th. So
Which page would you like?
if you see that lower right image, that the right-hand dormer on the main house, that's how it is today. And this is, now it's been expanded to about 14 feet in width, and it's about the same distance, it's 1 foot off the line of the house, but it's larger, and approximately 50% of that, the dormer existing and the expanded by width dormer is within the front setback. So it's a pretty minor ask, and I have, if you have my March 7th submission with plans from the architect, it shows it graphically. It's a little hard for Steph to find things because things came in at different times.
Yeah, I only have the original application that was submitted originally when the Fisher v. Dover was in question.
Okay, so I can pass this around if the board doesn't have it, but the plan I'm talking about was attached to my March 7th, 2023 submission. Is that something people would like to take a look at?
Yeah, bring it up.
Yes.
It's very easily graphically seen in this image, existing conditions, proposed conditions.
Isn't this what you came back for? After the first application was denied, you came
No,
back?
we came back to expand the front entryway and put some eyebrow.
Yeah.
This was different. This was just a change that was made when considering construction issues and what they were going to do with the interior. So with that, I'll just go forward. Does anybody want to pass this?
Sure, let
Yeah,
us see.
I mean, she should have it.
Pretty sure we have it.
I thought I saw
So that's what today, and
Yes, I
that's
have
what's
to
going
see what he's showing us.
Yeah, it's this.
Yeah, pretty sure.
So March 21st, is that the one?
No, but that says March 21.
I think it was March 7th.
March 7th?
That's that one.
Guess we have to see
Is
what's
it?
different.
Isn't that the expanded dormer?
Oh, yes, yes, good call.
This is the current
Right?
Yeah,
application
let
here.
me say a page number.
It's on,
It looks a
Yeah,
lot.
well, I'll keep going while you're passing that. It's pretty self-explanatory once you look at those two right-hand images. So forgive me, because some of you are going to hear this again for the second time since we did this months ago. But for the new members or people who weren't sitting at the time, 67 Ridgers Court, it's a 16,500 square foot lot at the end on the left of Ridgers Court on Little Harbor. It's in the single residence B zone. And on the lot today is a 1 3/4 story, 1591 square foot footprint, 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath Cape Cod style home. There's a detached shed on the northerly side of the property and a dock extending into Little Harbor. Most of the lot up to the house, at the corner of the house, is located in the 100-foot tidal buffer zone, as I say, including a corner of the existing home and one of the paved driveway, the larger driveway on the right side of the house that we just talked about reducing. As we discussed ad nauseum 15 minutes ago, this addition is significantly smaller than the addition that we previously proposed for the reasons stated. I'll add all of those discussions on the record for this particular hearing unless you want to hear it again. So, we've got a 518 square foot addition now. As with before, it's going over a portion of the paved driveway, so that's one of the reasons it's reducing overall coverage. The other reason is because we're taking out that sort of semicircular driveway that's outside of the rectangular permeable parking space next to the garage, which was put in there because that's where a second car was going to go in the garage. So it's going to go somewhere from time to time. There is another garage on the other side of the house. So we meet building coverage requirements. We're reducing impervious coverage, as we talked about. We're complying with open space requirements. And to Mr. Mandel's comment previously, my experience is that it is very unusual to go to essentially the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board for the reasons that John said until you come here, because you don't know what you're really asking them to approve. But we will be having to go to the Planning Board for a conditional use permit for work in the buffer, which will also include review and comment by the Conservation Commission. So the relief that we need is the front setback, which requires 19 feet. Right now, we've got 8.2 to the existing front porch, 13.6 to the home, and our addition is going to be at 15.8. And then we need the dormer requires 19 feet. Existing is about 14 feet. It's just smaller, and it's staying at the same plane location. It's just getting wider. And then for both of those, we also need the expansion of a nonconforming structure, because both of those do expand a nonconforming structure. And the things I'd like you to keep in mind, I'll try to skip the ones that we already have. Let's see. The pending proposal is intended to address the concerns of the board with respect to view sheds and the neighbors. And as I mentioned, if you move from 15.8 to 19, you're not going to totally eliminate the blocking of the views of the neighbors. Moving back, the house back increases impervious because now you've got to continue the driveway to get to the new addition. And it also puts it closer, the back of the house closer to the buffer the further back you go. We've talked about the experienced appraiser's opinion and our realtor's opinion that both by view of the tax information that is outlined in Robin Valeri's letter, which has been appended here as an exhibit, and Jeff Foy's own testimony about his conversations with the tax assessor's office, the neighbors don't pay more money for having a view. And the view shed diagram that John did does show an improvement in views compared to previously. As we talked about, the buffer issues are not a zoning board issue, it's a planning board issue. So turning to the variance requirements for this new project, the first two, which you always hear me do together, are that the variances are not contrary to the public interest in the spirit of the ordinance is observed, and the zoning ordinance asks us to look at section 10.121, which is the general purposes, which include looking at the use of land and buildings and structures for business, industrial, residential, and other purposes. This will remain residential. Again, we've tried to compromise to add something that we think we want and need and makes our lives better and more livable, and is also addressing the neighbor's concerns and those of this board. The intensity of land use, including lot sizes, building coverage, height, bulk, yards, and open space. We're not affecting anybody's air and light. We don't need coverage allowance. We don't need sight lines for vehicle purposes or pedestrian walking purposes, et cetera. We look at the design of facilities for vehicular access. We've got a garage, a one-car garage that will be backed out of. The impact on properties of lighting, noise, vibration, there really will be none. It's a single-family residence. Preservation and enhancement of the visual environment. We think that these additions, the expansion of the dormer in this addition is tasteful, well done. It's designed by professional architects, and therefore will not harm surrounding property values or negatively impact them. We look at preservation of the visual environment. Again, we think this is visually pleasing and has been reduced to enhance the visual environment for others looking out towards the Little Harbor. Historic districts doesn't apply, and protection of natural resources. We are, by doing this, further protecting the resource by protecting more of the buffer than if we were to have an even larger addition at 19 feet or this addition at 19 feet. So those first two sections that I always go through together due to the Malachi Glen case and its progeny, I ask us whether upon review will granting the variance unduly and to a marked degree conflict with the ordinance such that it violates the ordinance's basic zoning objectives. Mere conflict is not enough. The Supreme Court has boiled that case down to whether granting the variances alters the essential character of the locality or threatens the public health, safety, or welfare. This addition will be code compliant. The character of the locality is that there are numerous homes in this area up and down Ridges Court that are too close to one or the other of the lot line. That's how we got to the 19-foot average, because the house next door, if you go back up Ridges Court, is closer. The neighbors across the street are fairly close to their lot lines. If you look at the tax map, which you've included, numerous are. So these variances, which is for slight 3.5-foot roughly setback relief and expansion relief, are not out of character in the neighborhood. And for the same reasons, They don't threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. The third variance we test is that granting the variances will not diminish surrounding property values. Again, we're looking at a variance from 19 feet down to 15.8 feet. At the same time, we're improving impervious coverage. We have an appraiser and a real estate broker or agent who have opined with detail that this will not, it's the variances now, not the project, but the variances we need will not diminish property values. And I ask you to keep in mind, as I said earlier, that moving this face back 3.5 feet isn't really going to improve property, isn't going to improve view sheds very much. Finally, fourth test is denial of the variances results in an unnecessary hardship. And the first prong of that is that special conditions distinguish the property from others in the area. Roughly half of the property is in the buffer. The house is where it is. It already violates the current front setback, which probably the ordinance is sort of, if you will, outpaced or underpaced by the neighborhood because many homes in the neighborhood don't meet that requirement. You have to add the addition where the existing house is, and it has to line up architecturally and livability-wise inside. So for all of those reasons, we believe that special conditions exist to allow us a 3.5-foot variation from the front setback. The second prong of that test is that there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the ordinance and its application. So why do we have setbacks? We have setbacks for stormwater treatment, which we don't need here. We have setbacks for separation from neighbors. Most of the houses, including this house, are close to the street. For air and light, this is on the far side of a building with nobody on the right side of it, so we're not affecting anybody's air and light. And for viewing purposes, not views to the water, but views if you're walking up the street or driving a car, so you're not interfering with your neighbors or other vehicles. And so, since those are the reasons for setback variances, expansion variances are to prohibit overbulking of homes. Again, this is tasteful. It doesn't overbulk the home. So we believe that we have met the requirement that there's no fair and substantial relationship. The final prong of the hardship test is that the proposed use is reasonable. I usually cite the case I have here, which is Vigent v. Hudson, which says that if it's a permitted use, it's deemed reasonable. This is a residential use, a slight expansion, but as it's residential, it's reasonable. And the final test is that substantial justice will be done by granting the variance. And it's a very clear application of the requirement of the tests by the Supreme Court, which I typically cite. The Harborside case says if there's no benefit to the public that would outweigh the hardship to the applicant, this factor is satisfied. And again, under the Malachi Glen case that I've cited, any loss to the applicant not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. As I always do, I cite the constitutionality arguments, but it boils down to sort of a balancing test. So we're retaining the use. We're offering additional covered parking, which is good for the environment. We're expanding, but reducing from previous applications the living space, moving things that needed requirements, the deck and trellis to the back where they don't need any setback relief anymore, the FOIs are trying to be reasonable under all of the circumstances, given the comments of the board at the previous hearing last summer and by the neighbors. Denial of this variance does not harm the public, the general public in any way, but denial of the variances harms the FOIs because they will not be able to undertake this tasteful addition and related improvements to their homes. And I throw in the dormer. I don't know if there's anything Jeff or John want to add or say, but that's my presentation. If you have questions, I'll answer them. I do think Jeff has some things he wants to say, so he'll go in the 5-minute issue.
Yeah, you can do that. Are there any questions for Attorney Phoenix before we?
Okay, I'm here if you need me.
Thank you. All right. Now, is there anyone in the public who would like to speak to this, in favor of this petition?
Hi, again, Jeff Foy, the property owner. The only thing that I also saw when I reviewed the hearing 8 months ago was a point that Mr. Mantle made, and so I wanted to just address it. The real estate appraiser and the real estate agent made mention of the fact that, in their opinion, a view of the harbor where we are, which is part of the day has water and part of the day is not, was a lower valuation than a property that would have water 24/7, right, all day. But I think that opinion was somehow extended to the opinion of my wife and I as to what we preferred or what we liked. I think the comment was something along the lines, you can't have it both ways. I just want to say that was their opinion of value is their opinion of value. My opinion of what I like and is, I think it's pretty clear by the fact that I bought the property and chose to live there. So I just wanted to correct that, that's all. So that's all I had, if anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone to speak against this petition?
Madam Chair, members of the board, Attorney Derek Durbin. I'm here on behalf of Kathleen Thompson of 65 Ridges Court, which is a direct abutter across the street. I was put in the unenviable position of filling in for somebody this evening. Darcy Pizer had previously submitted a letter of opposition to the board. Has submitted letters of opposition depending on the application before the board related to this property. The most recent being from March 20th. That incorporated a lot of the prior arguments that have been made to the board concerning this property and the relief being sought. Taking some of what I would call the more arguable points out of this pertaining to view sheds, diminution of property values, those things that have been debated back and forth. I think there is one thing the board can focus on in particular, which is the reason why the prior application was denied. The reason the prior application was denied was on the hardship criteria. The setback relief being applied for, regardless of how you frame it, is essentially the same. And you can say, okay, we adjusted the setback relief to be, we're seeking a 15.5 foot setback where 19 feet is required versus 30. The reality is the location is exactly the same. The other reality is that the burden is on the applicant to measure their setbacks. It's not on the city to determine that it's a 30-foot versus a 19-foot setback. One of the things that you do is you do that averaging if you believe that you have a lesser setback to make your relief look like less. But the impact here is exactly the same. The board made a determination based on the prior variance for the front yard setback that the unnecessary hardship criteria was not met. Unnecessary hardship criteria boiled down: is this property unique in its environment such that it's unfairly burdened? Is there a fair and substantial relationship between the general purpose of the ordinance provisions and their application of the property? In this instance, there is. The property itself is not unfairly burdened. It's very similarly situated to those properties that surround it that are waterfront, both in size and wetland buffer protection. I would point out that the hardship card has been played successfully in the past, not by this applicant, by a predecessor owner in title that was able to put an addition on the property. That addition was ultimately used as living space. Does create some of the hardship argument behind the need for garage space now on this side of the property. For these reasons, I don't think the unnecessary hardship criteria can be met. You can move some things around. You could slightly reduce the size of the addition being sought, but the reality is that there is no real special condition associated with this property that really unfairly burdens it when in comparison with surrounding properties. I think another point that can be made here is with respect to the character of the neighborhood. This addition just adds to what will become a more sprawling structure, which I believe is out of character with the other homes, properties within the neighborhood. So I do believe that there is a spirit of the ordinance issue here. I believe the applicant would probably debate that. But again, I think the board can go back, look at its prior decision, what the rationale was behind that, finding that the unnecessary hardship criteria was not met, and find the same here tonight. I know there was discussion about reduction in impervious surface and all that. I would submit to the board that that's not really before this board's purview. That's going to be discussed very heavily at the Conservation Commission. They've wanted to shift some of the argument behind the opposition to this application into the Conservation Commission, appropriately so, and I think that issue belongs there. So I don't think that that's something the board can consider as some material change that makes this fit more squarely within the criteria than any other prior applications. For those reasons, my client does not support the application that's before you. I thank you for the time appearing before you tonight, and welcome new members. I'm sure I'll see you again next month. So thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
I think not. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else to speak in opposition? Is there anyone to speak to, for, or against?
I'll be very brief.
Welcome back.
Yeah, I'll be very brief, and thank you, Derek, for being brief. I'd just like to comment on the hardship. It was my mistake, as I mentioned, about the 15.5 at needing 30 feet at the first application, and I should have picked it up. But the point I was trying to make is what the board was considering at that time was 15.5 and 30. Even though it was erroneous, that's what was before you to consider. That is a significant change. And the Attorney Durbin used the term, is this property unique? Well, that's not the test. It's whether it's got distinguishing characteristics from its surroundings. That area, it's on the water. There are numerous homes on the water, but most are not, and that distinguishes it from the overall greater neighborhood. There's not that many. If you've been down there, there are a number of small, older houses, and there are a number of, what I would call McMansions that have been rebuilt over the years. So it's not all the same. The reduction in size is not slight. So his points of character of the neighborhood fail, in our opinion, and his points in hardship. And my read of the minutes of the meeting and looking at the reviews, which I haven't done for some time after the first hearing, was that while hardship was cited, there wasn't really a great deal of explanation of how and why the hardship wasn't satisfied. So I think we've tried to flesh that out for your consideration now, and again, we ask you to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to, for, or against? Okay. In that case, the public hearing is closed. Here we are. Discussion? No?
I'm not going to support the variance request because, for one, as obvious by my previous discussion, I don't feel like this application materially differs from the previous application. And then something Attorney Phoenix just said that, they, in rewatching the previous hearing on this, they didn't think that the hardship requirement was very well fleshed out for the board. And they are doing it for now, and I think that is a classic second bite at the apple. I mean, I don't think it met hardship first time, and I don't think it meets hardship this time. I think it's the same application, a substantially similar application. So I will not be supporting it. Just wanted to, in case anyone wondered.
Mr. Mattson.
Just to add on to that, I think the only potential catching point for me is the unnecessary hardship. I think this doesn't alter the essential character of the neighborhood, doesn't reduce surrounding property values, is not harmful to the public. And within the unnecessary hardship, the proposed use is a reasonable one, so even that's not an issue. Then also, there are some similarities with this property and other properties, but one thing that I can see is that the combinations of factors on this property can combine to create special conditions. I think that's potentially sways me, but I do agree that the unnecessary hardship is the kind of the catching point.
I mean, I'm a little perplexed by the how complicated this whole case has gotten. The way I look at it is that the addition, as in its, I don't care what the first proposal was because that's irrelevant now. We've already decided that we've passed, over the Fisher v. Dover hurdle, so there's no point thinking about that. In the current proposal, if I understand it correctly, both the addition and the dormer are farther set back from the front road than the existing structure. And typically, the way I look at that is that it's not bringing the property farther out of conformance. And I don't have a problem with that. I think the bar is pretty low when you're not increasing the non-conformance of the property. So I will be supporting the application.
Okay. I was going to ask for a motion before we continue discussion, but if you want to go, you may.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just to continue the discussion for a little bit. So we've had some discussion here about, you're just moving the porch to the back of the house. Again, we need to understand that the only variance that is being asked for here by the applicant is a front yard setback of essentially 16 feet, where 19 feet is required. I know it's advertised a little bit less because there is a little bit of aspect towards the current line of the house. But so, in terms of the porch being moved to the back, again, this is a 16,500 square foot lot. If we look at the additional coverage that's allowed, the applicant can get another 415-ish square feet of additional building if they wanted to, as long as it's not in any of the setbacks. So the applicant is more than welcome to go and provide more building in that area. That is not the purview of this board. Open space, I know we've talked a lot about impervious, pervious. The current open space requirement is only 40% for this. The applicant is actually improving that with this by a few percents. So in theory, they could go and add another 6,105 square feet of some kind of surface that would be considered to be not open space, and they could still go and do it. So they could go and, at least as far as this board is concerned, increase, put a parking lot there. We talked, view sheds. There's been a lot of discussion about view sheds. Maybe it's hidden in here somewhere, really tight, but there's no definition of view shed in our zoning ordinance. There's no discussion of view shed in our zoning ordinance. That's a concept that in the past there has been a couple of, I can think of one instance which came back up before us a couple of months ago, where an applicant, in out of a kindness to their neighbors and to try and address some of their neighbors' concerns about a view shed, put something in a plan and put it on record granting an easement for a view shed across their property. That was a choice that was made by that applicant to respect their wishes of their neighbor. There's certainly no requirement for that. I think we had a pretty famous case here in Portsmouth where on Bow Street, a property tried to sue I believe it was the Martingale Wharf building over reduction in view shed of the river. Ultimately, I don't think they got anywhere with it. It's basically not something that's recognized as a right that a budding property has. So I'd be careful about any further discussion about view sheds. So what we're really talking about here is essentially a 3-foot encroachment into the front setback requirement. For this new addition, I'm okay with it in the sense that, and I think we've approved a lot more as a board, as has been pointed out by Mr. Rossi, that it is in fact further setback from the overall current rest of the home. So it's not a huge setback, but it is setback further from it. It is also of no greater height. In fact, it's just slightly smaller than the existing home. Again, not immensely so, but overall this addition is not incredibly large compared to what is existing on the home, what is allowed by right if the applicant moved the front of it back some 3 feet, which there may be pros and cons to doing. And again, I think one of the hardship aspects here is having some respect for the wetlands, and I think that the applicant has moved the project further away from the wetlands from their original application, and only looking at it in that sense. So with that, I think that this meets all the criteria and should be approved, and is my thought. Over. Thank you.
A motion? Somebody?
Coin toss, I'll do it. I move to approve the variance as presented and publicized.
I will second that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rossi, would you elaborate on that, please?
Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, nor would it be contrary to the spirit of the ordinance. This is a residentially zoned area. The proposed variance continues the use of the property for residential purposes and therefore meets those criteria. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. No one has even claimed that there's a general loss to the public of any kind if this variance is granted. Therefore, there is no loss to the public that would outweigh the benefit to the applicant, and this criteria is also satisfied. Granting that the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties, I would like to acknowledge that we've had contrary evidence presented by those for and against the variance proposal. In weighing the facts and looking at the analysis, and particularly hearing the feedback from the tax assessment perspective, I do not think that there is adequate evidence to support the idea that the surrounding properties would be diminished in value should this variance be approved, and therefore .24 is satisfied. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. There is a special condition to the property in a sense, and that is that the front of the structure, the existing structure, already encroaches upon the required 19-foot setback, and therefore we're starting with a non-conforming property. And the proposed variance involves a structure, two structural elements that are farther setback than the existing structure, and therefore do not increase the degree of nonconformance of the property. And because of that, I would say that there is no obvious relationship between the provision of the ordinance and a reason to deny this variance. So I believe that the hardship criterion is met.
Thank you. Mr. Graham, would you like to add?
Yeah, just emphasizing a couple of points. The substantial justice, really, that's our balancing test between the public interest here and the interest of the owner. Again, what we're talking about is a slice of this proposed addition that is roughly just over 3 feet by the length of the addition long, that the applicant needs relief for. What is the real interest of the general public in preventing that? I don't see where there's enough there that says that not allowing the applicant to have that is outweighed by any general public interest. I do believe the applicant, although viewshed again is not necessarily something that's in our zoning ordinance, I think the applicant is, based off of feedback from neighbors, trying to provide some additional benefit there. It is possible, again, the applicant has additional square footage that they could utilize here, somewhat constrained by the wetlands considerations as they move closer to the water. But you could reform the allowed square footage into a new shape. I think it would, in fact, be detrimental to the neighbors if they reformed that shape into something that was more approximating of what they had originally proposed versus what they're proposing now. So I think in that sense that the public interest is that balancing test is balanced in favor of the applicant. And again, for the hardship, I think Mr. Rossi's point is excellent on the current home is non-conforming. It's been that way for a considerable period of time. The proposed addition is slightly more conforming, but again, not fully conforming. And that some of the, again, the wetlands aspects to this property, there's also variations in the height of the property as well. If we look at this plan here, there's some slope aspects to it here that again, could drive the proposed addition into a certain configuration. So I think those are all aspects that make this a reasonable request on the part of the applicant.
Thank you.
Can I ask the moving party to clarify the motion, because we have actually two variances on the table. One is for the addition, which requires a variance from the setback requirements, and the other is kind of related, but it's the dormer plus addition. So your motion covers both of those, and the second is an expansion of an existing structure,
But it doesn't need
non-conforming
variance, does it?
structure. Right, which you're just including the dormer with
I'm
the
including
addition.
both. The same logic applies to both
Yep. Thanks.
But the
aspects.
plane is plane, right, same plane. Okay, thank you. All right. Is there further discussion?
Everyone, because 90% of the house lots in Portsmouth are non-conforming.
Non-conforming, right. Just clarifying for the record, that's all.
I am going to support the motion, somewhat to my surprise. But when it boils down to it, it really is the front yard. And again, given that the primary structure was at 8 and this is at 14, it's going in the right direction. And, okay, roll call vote with Mr. Mattson first.
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Raham?
Yes.
Ms. Marchison?
No.
Mr. Mannel?
No.
I'm sorry, I'm switching to ML.
And that's fine. Yes.
And the chair's voting yes. So you are approved.
I do too.
Okay. We normally take a break at 9, but I think we're going to do this right now before we get into the middle of another application. And I'm sorry that this has been such a long evening, and we appreciate your patience, but we will be back in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Not a second longer. Thank you.
Case.
Okay, the zoning board meeting is back in session. The next item of business is the request of Michael Knight, owner, for property located at 55 Mangrove Street, whereas relief is needed to replace an existing 6-foot chain link fence with an 8-foot cedar fence, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.515.13 to allow an 8-foot fence on the rear and sidelines, where a 6-foot maximum is allowed. Said property is located on Assessor Map 219, Lot 7, and lies within the Single Residence B District. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for hearing me. I have some better pictures than the ones I put online. If
Yes,
I can just
but
pass
tell us
these.
who you are first.
Oh, I'm Michael Knight. I'm the homeowner.
Okay.
I'm trying to replace the dilapidated old chain link fence in my backyard.
And then you can hand out the materials, which we will keep. They cannot go back to you.
Is his microphone on?
So you may not want to relinquish them.
Well, there.
Is it,
It should be. No one shut it.
maybe it's moving.
Oh, this is, yeah, that's not Sharon.
Check that the microphone is on, or get a little closer, please.
Pass that down there. I will share with you. No.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Oh, you're not.
point of order, who's our voting members for this application?
Yes. Jody will be the alternate for this. We're going to alternate the rest of the evening.
We've only done one application.
Yeah, so, okay, please go ahead.
Okay. So sorry, this is my first time I've done this before. So I want to replace this, while I'm replacing the fence with a cedar fence, I want to add 2 feet to it, because if you look at those pictures, you can see I currently have cedar fence on the front of the house, but the back of the house dips down 2 or 3 feet, the backyard, so I want to make it level with the front. And by doing an 8-foot fence in the back, it'll be level with the fence in the front. And I don't really have any houses beside me or in the back of me, so that's my case.
Would you like to speak to the criteria we will use? You need not, but you might want to consider it.
Sure. So I don't think that it won't be, it would not be contrary to public interest again, because I don't have any houses beside me or behind me. The house or the land behind me is actually a city parcel that's empty. To my left is a neighbor who's also has a fence, and to my right is the back of the Spinnaker condominiums maintenance building. And I think it'll provide a better, actually I think in sort of providing a better view for everyone involved. I have more privacy, they have more privacy. Spinnaker's pool is back there, so it provides myself and them with more privacy, being a little bit higher, because now the way it dips down in the back of the house, it's a clear shot when you're on the deck.
Okay.
So as far as the spirit of the ordinance, I certainly understand the need for this type of thing in the historic district or close quarter neighbors. But like I said, where I am, I don't really have that. Again, the substantial justice will be done. I feel like everybody involved this is helping everybody, all my neighbors, making it better looking fence with better privacy. And I think if anything, it will increase the value of all the properties around me as well as my own. And I don't believe that there is any unnecessary hardship involved. The one neighbor that I do have that abuts me with the fence, we're great friends, and she supports me fully, so.
Okay. The other questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could turn to page 244 in our packet, I don't know if you can show that. You were talking about a neighbor who had a fence.
Yeah.
So in this case here, it does appear, well, on one side is what I believe is the sort of the community center for the Spinnaker Way condos is on one side of you, is that correct?
It's actually the maintenance building.
Maintenance
the community center is further down the street.
Okay, I saw the pool, I couldn't.
Yeah, it's on the other side of the pool.
Wasn't 100% sure how that placed. And then on the opposite side of you, it does appear like there's a paper street where Oak Street at one point potentially was continuing past your house, but
Correct, yep.
now that's sort of, how is that property between you and your neighbor on that side, identified here as lot 218-6? How is that property used? And your intent is your fence will run along your property line and not intrude on that paper street space, is that correct?
Correct, yeah, there's still, that street is still between my neighbor and myself.
Okay.
Or it's not a street, but that space.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay.
Thank
And you're
you.
set, yeah.
All right, thank
Okay.
you.
Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone to speak in opposition to this petition? Is there anyone to speak to, for, or against this request? Okay. In that case, the public hearing is closed, and it is up to us, board.
Madam Chair, I'd move that we approve the applicant's request as presented and advertised.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
That was Mr. Manno.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So this is kind of first of all, this provision in our zoning ordinance is, relatively new. It came about in the time that I spent on the board. Really, we used to have no restrictions, and as I've discussed in a previous case a month or two ago, our zoning ordinance had no restrictions on the height of fences. You could make it as high as you wanted to spend the money to go and do. That was tempered a little bit with the idea that certainly in many properties in Portsmouth, properties are tight up against neighboring properties, or more importantly up against streets and whatnot, and you can sort of create these very uninviting facades, create your own little gated community if you want to do something along those lines. So as a result, the zoning ordinance was changed by recommendation of the planning board and adopted by the city council to try and limit the height of fences. That said, this particular applicant here, I think, is sort of the poster child of exactly why a variance could be allowed in this new requirement. Basically trying to put this fence out into areas where the neighboring properties are what I originally thought was a community center, has been validated as a actual maintenance building, not like you're not putting a fence up against a neighbor and trying to block it off and make something offensive to them on one side. The applicant has the benefit of a natural resource protection, city-owned piece of property on the far side of the property, and then on the other side is what is a paper street. So they're actually not butted up against a neighboring property, and also there's really no house back there or anything like that where somebody would be offended by the fact that the higher fence has been set up in that location. So with that, I'll go through the relevant facts associated with the variance criteria. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. Again, the public interest here is to prevent these very high walls from being, very high fences being placed up near areas where the public would be going by, or creating an unnecessarily hostile view for a close abutting neighboring property. None of that applies in this particular case. I think there's really no public interest here. It is not out of spirit of out of the characteristics of the neighborhood. Granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. Again, the ordinance was really set up for the purposes of trying to ensure that we don't have these territorial border wars going on where you've got high fences so that aren't able to see your neighbors, etc. I mean, I think the ask here is far more reasonable with all these open areas and as the applicant has noted, with the grade change. So I don't think there's anything here that is in violation of what the intent was when the ordinance was updated. Granting the variance would do substantial justice against our balancing test. Again, there's really no public interest here, especially with the nature of the properties that are surrounding this particular property. That would say that there's a public interest that outweighs the applicant's interest in having a somewhat uniform fence height, considering the dip in the property, and then allowing a suitable privacy based off of that fact as well. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, the condo association really has a maintenance building there. Nothing that's going to negatively affect that. And then with the sort of the gaps to the neighboring properties along Mangrove, as well as the city-owned property to the rear, there really is nothing there will negatively affect property values. And lastly, the unnecessary hardship. And again, I do think there are unique factors about this property, as has been indicated. Its location up against a paper street, up against a protected piece of property, and a sort of generic use of a condo association, neighboring condo association, creates special characteristics that distinguish this property from other similar properties. The request is a reasonable one, and there is really no factors that would weigh in that would say there's general public provisions that would outweigh what the applicant is asking for here. Therefore, I recommend approval.
Thank you. Does the second have anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay. If not, a yes vote allows the 8-foot fence. Jeff?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
David? Mr. Rams?
Yes.
Jody?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
And Beth?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So, okay. Thank you for coming.
Correspondence back and forth.
You're welcome.
Oh, Attorney Phoenix, we haven't seen you in an
Deja vu.
application.
This is it for me tonight, just so you know, be happy.
Excuse me, who are you?
So the next application is the request of John T. McDonald III and Mary R. McDonald, owners, for property located at 74 Sunset Road, whereas relief is needed for an addition of a chimney bump out, which requires the following. 1, variances from section 10.521 to allow A 6.5-foot left yard where 10 is required, and B, 26.6% building coverage where 20% is required. 2, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a nonconforming building or structure to be expanded, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 153, Lot 14, and lies within the Single Residence B District.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I'm Tim Phoenix from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts. I'm here tonight on behalf of Mary and John McDonald. Mary is with me in the second row, and Butch Rishi is with me, and he's doing the construction. Many of you will remember that we were here in September requesting relief from this board, which was granted, I believe, unanimously, to do an expansion of this relatively small home by adding a dormer on the top, on the roof, essentially, again, connecting a breezeway from the house to the detached garage, and putting a doghouse over the rear porch. At that time, there was a set of steps on the right side of the building, which is what we're talking about now, that were closer to the right side lot line than we are now proposing. Butch, I just asked him, and he confirmed that they did get a building permit for all of the work, including this bump out. So they believed that they were building this new chimney lawfully. I have some photographs for you that I had intended to submit with my application, but I did not, and they together with this plan, tell the story very clearly. Submitted with my original application were letters from 3 of the abutters, the Gellers at 73 Sunset, the Matthews at 69 Sunset, and Scott Shadoin at 76. What I didn't have, but now have, and I will hand this out as well, and I don't expect them back, just so you know, is a letter from Pat Wallace of 50 Sunset Road, and I'm told that Ms. Wallace is the immediate neighbor to the right. To the left? She's on the left, okay.
Yeah, we got it.
So Scott Shadoin is on the right, and he has provided his consent as well. So looking here, you'll see the plan that you'll see at the bottom of the circle on that lower image is the steps that were there. Butch, his crew thought nothing of it because he had a permit, and because this, which is 12.3 feet, I think, it's about 12.375 square feet, coverage. But thought it was okay. And when Jason Page came out to do a typical inspection, he noticed the chimney, checked it against the plans, and of course, the chimney wasn't on the plans last time. So we've added that and asked for your approval with the understanding that the nearest neighbors approve of it. We've asked for 10 feet's required for the side setback. Existing is about 9. We're asking for 6.5. Most of it remains at 9, but this bump out, which is 2.25 by 5.5 feet, we're asking for that relief now because it was not determined. I could have requested an equitable waiver because it was built with understanding. I decided it's fairly straightforward and simple, so I didn't do that. I thought it was easier just to come and get the variance. Very quickly, public interest is not harmed, spirit of the ordinance is not harmed because we're not changing the essential character of the locality, nor are we threatening public health, safety, or welfare. The nearest affected neighbor approves of it. We're not going to diminish surrounding property values for the same reasons that we argued last fall, and the neighbors don't object. There is a hardship because the house is where it is. It's essentially right on, even actually a little closer to the lot line than the ordinance requires. So if you're going to add anything to it, you need a variance, and you have to add it. I assume this is in the living room. That's where it's added. Otherwise, you'd have to put the whole thing inside, which is taking up valuable space in a small living room. Special conditions, that's how special conditions distinguish the property, its location, where it is compared to the property line, et cetera. Why do we have setbacks for special no fair and special substantial relationship? Air, light, separation from neighbors, stormwater treatment, those kind of things. This is tiny, approved by the neighbor next door, so we think that's met. The proposed use is reasonable. Under the Vigent case, it's residential use. And substantial justice, if there's no benefit to the public, that would outweigh the hardship to the applicant. This factor is satisfied. We think that very clearly applies here. This is one of the most straightforward I've probably been before you with in quite a while. So I didn't want to belabor it for 20 minutes like I did the last couple.
We're grateful.
That's all I have unless you have questions.
I do have one quick question. It's just to confirm it's single family residence, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you just edify me, in the photos that you just handed out, the electric meter looks complicated, like there's 3 different meters there. Why is that on a single-family residence?
Come up here.
I'm Butch Ritchie, Portsmouth native. I like to always throw that out first. There used to be an electric hot water here, and there used to be a apartment above, I believe, or another use up there. So the 3 meters are now eliminated. We're going to go to 1 meter when we're done. So that meter was there when we purchased the home. There was a kitchen and a full apartment up on the 2nd floor. So that's been abandoned, and now it's a single residence.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions?
I didn't even know that.
There are no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone to speak in opposition to this petition? Is there anyone to speak to, for, or against this petition? Okay. Public hearing is closed. And a motion? And I should just clarify, I did say we were alternating, yes, so ML, you are on this, okay.
I'll let Jeff do some work.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve
Are we waiting each other out?
the application as presented.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll take the first 2 criteria together. The variance is not contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. This is a very small bump out for the fireplace that doesn't change the overall conditions of the property. It's very similar in character to the other homes in the neighborhood. and it has no harm to public health, safety, or welfare. Substantial justice is done. The benefit to the applicant is not outweighed by any harm to the public, as there is no detrimental effect to other individuals, and this would improve the quality of life of the applicants. The values of the surrounding properties are not diminished. There's no reason to think that this updated home and better layout would diminish any properties. For the fifth criteria, literal enforcement of the hardship, or literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. The special conditions of the property are that the location of the home on the property, and the property is a smaller lot than the zoning that was implemented after the property existed, and the current layout of the home is already as it was. So these special conditions distinguish it, and there's no fair and substantial relationship between the general purposes of the ordinance provision regarding the setbacks and the specific application of that provision to this property with the fireplace bump out. And the proposed use is a reasonable one because this is still just a single family home, just adding a fireplace.
Thank you. Mr. Ram, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add to the supporting information for the variance criteria. We'll kind of say this has probably got to be the most expensive 13 square feet of house in Portsmouth, recognizing that suspecting Attorney Phoenix is not doing this pro bono. It's unfortunate that we do run into situations like this, and I understand that city staff, the city building inspector is just doing his job as perceived, but it's unfortunate that, I really think that this board's relief that was granted easily would have included this small bump out associated with an interior fireplace, and that was certainly probably captured in the intent, but not literally captured. And it is unfortunate. We've seen a few other of these types of situations where there's a small discrepancy in some dimensional aspect, which oftentimes this board and myself also bring up just to make sure it doesn't happen when construction occurs. But it's unfortunate that something as small as this has to come back before this board and both take up the board's time and some substantial cost to the applicant as well.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, a yes vote allows for the chimney bump. Okay. Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Rayum?
Yes.
ML?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay. Just going to shake it up a little. Okay. The next application is the request of Joshua Wyatt and Aaron Hickman, owners for property located at 196 Aldridge Road, whereas relief is needed to demolish existing garage and construct new garage and construct new addition over existing side porch, which requires the following. 1. Variances from section 10.521 to allow A, a secondary front yard of 3 feet where 30 is required. Excuse me. B, a 6-foot rear setback where 10 feet 7 inches is required. C, 23% building coverage where 20% is the maximum allowed. 2, a variance from section 10.571 to allow an accessory structure to be 10 feet from the front lot line and located in the front yard. 3, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming building or structure to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 153, Lot 25, and lies within the single residence B district. Welcome.
Thank you. My name for the record, Josh Wyatt, owner. With me is my wife, Erin, and our designer, Hubert Kroll.
Hello.
Here tonight, mindful we are asking for exceptions to the rules, but also mindful that the rules came into existence many years after this property was created and developed in the 1920s. This was part of the Westfield Park subdivision then, which, historical fact, I guess, bordered on what were then the subsistence farms during the Great Depression. Happy to answer questions anytime. Our package of variances here for a project really trying to update our house and make it more, make it usable for us. We're the kind of couple, we have 2 small children and considered moving, and frankly, really love our neighbors and neighborhood, so we're trying to make the house work in a modern environment. Now, the house is unique because it's situated on the corner of Aldridge and Joffrey, so it's on 2 public roads. The setbacks are more severe, if you will, the impact, and it's a small lot, and it's already non-conforming in several aspects, so almost anything you do to it will require a variance. What we're proposing is, in essence, we have a pre-existing non-conforming garage, basically demolish it and rebuild it toward the rear property line, and to enclose our side porch and build up, essentially, and make that side porch interior finished space. And that allows us to do a lot more interior than we otherwise could. Hubert and my wife are both much more in tune with the technical aspects. But we did review this concept before we filed for variances. We reviewed it with the 3 most affected abutters, which would be the abutter next to the garage, Caddy Corner, and then over here on Joffrey Terrace. And we're all supportive, or not opposed, I should say, to the project. A couple were supportive. One thing to know about the garage I would point out is that you can't see it here. It is on some of the other plans. It would be built kind of into a hill, so it's not as imposing as it might seem on this paper. If you actually were standing at that abutter and looking back across our property, I don't think it's really going to make a difference for them. And I don't want to speak for them, but I don't think they disagree. That's showing the current garage, and it's right up against the other neighbor's boundary. So reviewing the criteria, I think it's in the public interest. They're certainly not contrary. Certainly, I think improves this house. It's not an intensity of use or a change in type of use. And I think it would just add to the tax base for the city, frankly. I think it's consistent with the spirit of the ordinance. I mean, clearly we have zoning to have orderly and development and make sure that we're not imposing. And I mean, this is maintaining the same use. The neighbors aren't opposed to it. It's in a subdivision that was created long before the modern zoning rules applied. And we're not proposing anything out of step with the neighborhood or our zone. And we'd like to think it's a tasteful design. Substantial justice, we think there are substantial benefits to us, the homeowner. Clearly, that's why we want to do it. These will include, I mean, we're trying to create really a usable backyard. Our lot's so small, if the kids want to go play in the yard, we really don't use the front yard because there's so much traffic on Aldridge and it's going fairly fast because there's no stop sign. So there's plenty of cut-through traffic. So that makes us look at the backyard. Problem is there, and this, I can tell you multiple examples, cars wheel around Joffrey, pizza delivery people, and, you know, we don't want our kids, it's a hard situation. So what's attractive about this is that it creates a bit of a buffer from the streets for our yard, for our kids. Not to say it's the only reason, but I mean, that is a big reason for this. The interior space changes, enclosing those will allow us to basically create a new flow in the house. If you go in it, it's one of these houses where it has 2 stories and an attic space that's been finished. So now you have an interior staircase that goes through one of the bedrooms. So it's not really effective as a bedroom. I don't think, and getting back to substantial justice, I don't think that denying this will do any public benefit. On values of surrounding properties, our experience has been in this neighborhood in Portsmouth generally that these kinds of projects tend to increase surrounding property values. Certainly don't diminish them. Like I mentioned, the project's consistent with the neighborhood, and I don't think it's imposing on any of our neighbors. And on the unnecessary hardship prong, as I mentioned, I think it's a unique property. We're on the corner of two public streets. We have pre-existing lot, house, and garage and several nonconformities. And we are trying to basically account for that in a modern proposed design. Happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What is, looking at your page 277 of our packet, what is the current dimensions for your garage? It's not listed there. The new garage is on plan AD3. It's shown as 14 by 24. I'm just curious what the existing garage is.
It's on the plan.
Hi, my name's Hewlett Crow. I'm the designer. It's about 20 by 12.
20 by 12.
20 by 12 measured at the foundation.
Okay, thank you. And then looking at your at 83, so the next page, 278. Now it kind of does create this sort of right angles to try and get in and out of your garage. Have you looked at, this doesn't have to go through site plan review because it's a single-family home, but have you looked at the difficulties associated with backing the vehicle in and out of your new garage location? It's kind of an odd arrangement, so I'm just curious what's been looked at for that.
That is a very good insight. It is something we've considered, and actually, Erin, do you want to speak to that? No, she does not want to speak to that. We did talk about that, and I think we're prepared to deal with that. And frankly, in some ways, it will probably be used more to store things rather than cars. So, if you will, it will be more of a shed. Although I think my car probably could fit in there, and I probably could back it in there. But that's the answer.
Okay. And then my other concern is, so again, staying on that same plan, so page 278, and thankfully in your plot plan, as you should, you've represented what the actual buildable area is on your property without relief. So it is this rather small rectangle. Again, being on a corner lot has some advantages. One of the disadvantages is that you have now the secondary front yard, which imposes, in this case, a 30-foot setback where 10 feet would be required. You're proposing a substantial vertical expansion throughout pretty much the whole entire square footage of your existing home. So I just want to validate, as far as you understand, all of that vertical expansion is subject to this board's purview. Is that what your understanding was as well? Because of the nature of the small amount of room that you have there. Virtually all of it. Obviously, the portion that is within that small rectangle would be covered. But
do you mean the vertical expansion in the setback?
Yeah. So vertical expansion. Taking a look further along, so basically, page 283, plan AD-08. You are going from, the pictures below show the current status of your home as basically a two-story with, as you pointed out, a relatively shallow attic space without dormering. You are proposing to add pretty much an entire third story with what looks like a roof area that is, or roof height that's about comparable, maybe slightly shallower than what you currently have in your home. So all that vertical expansion, because of the fact that you have this additional 30-foot setback to the Joffrey Court because of the secondary front yard, that is something that this board has to approve. City staff, I'm not sure what your discussions were with the applicant, but would that be your impression as well?
I'm sorry, can you clarify what you're asking?
So, right now it's a 2-story home.
Yep.
The applicant is proposing essentially a 3-story home over what looks like all of the square footage of the existing footprint of the home. So going back to page either 278 or 277, the applicant has provided the setback allowances. So 30 feet from the front, up against Aldrich Road.
Yep.
30 feet from Joffrey Terrace, because it's a secondary front yard. 10 feet from the opposite side, because it's considered a side yard, and then 30 feet from the rear. So that relatively small rectangle is actually, by the zoning ordinance, what is the buildable, expandable portion of the current property.
But that's the primary structure. That's
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's on the staff memo that is part of the variance request, the 3 feet for the primary structure.
Yeah, so the 3 feet, but it's 3 feet where 30 feet is required. Right.
Yes.
So there's 27 feet of new structure that is something that requires this board's approval. You're looking at me quizzically.
I think I understand what you're saying.
My concern is the description in the staff was a new addition over existing side porch. This is really a new addition over more than just an existing side porch. This is really a new addition over the entire square footage of the home.
It does, but it's in there.
I see what you're saying. That's covered in the variance number 2. So
Correct.
allow the non-conforming building or the structure to be expanded.
Okay.
So whatever is non-conforming there, the variance requested is to expand that. The setbacks are not changing, but the vertical expansion is included in that.
Okay.
And it's 0.8 less than the existing structure.
The addition? Yeah. Okay, yes.
So I thought maybe Mr. Rayum's question would obviate the need for me to ask a question, but it only confused me further. I just need a little help connecting each one of the variances that are listed as non-conforming on our page 267 with specific elements of the plan. So the first one, secondary front yard, existing is 3.8, the required is 30, and the proposed is 3 for the primary structure and 9.75 for the garage. So where does the 3 for the primary structure come from? Is that the mudroom conversion?
Yes, that's actually more restrictive in the proposed as the staff memo than what is listed on this site plan. It's actually 3 feet and 11 inches, so it is more conforming in the site plan.
But the mudroom is new, right?
The mudroom is new. It takes the place of that front porch.
So it's currently a front porch.
Correct.
Which is 3'10", and the mudroom is 3 foot. So it's essentially the same footprint as the front porch. So that's where the 3 feet comes from. And then the 8.5 feet comes from the new location of the now rotated garage, correct? It's the garage is going to be like torn down and then rotated 90 degrees.
Correct.
And then you'll be 8.5 feet from the lot line.
9'9".
9.75. 9.75.
Okay, sorry, I scrolled past the page.
9'9", yes.
I misremembered.
We lined up the garage with the the edge
okay.
of the main building.
And then the 6-foot rear is also
That is
to the garage.
This is the new garage, yes.
Right, and that's where the garage is going to be, basically the footer for the garage is going to be substantially below the current grade.
Correct.
And then the building coverage percentage increases to 23% because of the addition of the mudroom?
Actually, the main, not so much the inclusion, it's look at the bottom, there's a couple of stairs going up, and there is a landing.
What are we looking at? Which
you see where the text block, new mudroom? Look, just below there, there is a set of stairs.
AD03?
On AD, yes, AD03,
So it's the stairs that push you up to 23%?
correct.
Huh.
I mean, from
think the
22.
garage is bigger, too.
Yeah, the garage is bigger also.
So,
Yeah.
Why are we leaving?
goes from,
Okay, all right. I
that's
just
the
wanted to
one
make
that,
sure.
that increases the main structure. And yes, the garage is slightly bigger than the existing one.
Yeah.
And that's how we get to the 2% that we're adding in lot coverage from, 1.7, from 21 to 22.7.
Right. The garage is bigger because it's longer or wider or both?
It's a slightly wider and slightly longer. It's more designed for a modern car. The new garage is 14 by 24, so 24 is the standard depth for a garage.
The new garage is 336 square feet. The existing garage is 242 square feet.
So it's significantly.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I could trace each one of the variances to a specific element of the plan. And
That's
now
what
I
I'm here
can.
for.
Thank you.
To help you with that. Gladly will.
Thank
Are
you
there-
very much.
I apologize, Madam Chair. I actually had a couple of additional questions.
Okay,
if I
go
could.
ahead.
Okay, thank you. So towards the end of our initial discussion, so again, there's substantial vertical expansion. That vertical expansion is within the purview of this board because it occurs within areas that are not buildable by right. So currently, this is a two-story home. Driving up Aldrich Road, my observation was that really you're looking at all the neighboring properties are also two-story homes with sometimes with some dormering on a third floor. I did not observe any building that I would say had like a full third floor like what's being proposed here. And again, one of our criteria is is in keeping with the characteristics of the neighborhood. So did I miss something, or what would you say is the characteristics of the neighborhood, and why would this proposal fit in with them?
Okay, then look at my last page, AD 11. There's a picture of the house right across the street, number 178 Aldrich. It's exactly the same house, actually, but you can see that they had a much larger lot, and they've added on horizontally. There's a two-story addition towards the left. There's two one-story additions behind. We were limited by our lot doing what to expand the house so that it would fit the use that the family needs. So the second floor that now becomes a third floor, which is a third floor right now, it is actually an attic. If you look at my plan here, AD07, there's two horizontal dotted lines. That's the flat ceiling, and that ceiling is just about 7 feet, just under 7 feet. So there's not much above my head in there. And so the rest of it is a sloped ceiling. So it is a playroom right now, but those kids are growing, and pretty soon they'll bang their heads into these walls there. And so that gave us, so the only way for us to increase the livable space in there was to create a full third story. We did toy with the idea of having dormers. However, with the extension of the front porch, that would have created some really cockamamie intersections there. And so we tried to keep the house very close to its original design. So basically what we're doing, we're taking the existing roof and we're raising it by just one stud, a 7'8" stud.
Okay, thank you. I understand that. And then one final question, if I can get back to the page. Sorry, my tablet is working slowly, very slowly. On AD08, so that's page 283 of our packet. You have existing height of the building is 25 feet 2 inches. Is that a measurement to the top of the roof, or is that the measurement as required by the zoning ordinance, which involves some bizarro calculation that has nothing to do with the actual height of the building?
It is the the measurement as required by the
By
zoning.
the zoning ordinance, okay. So, and I presume that that translates into, just a little further up on that, the 32 feet, 6 inches, as shown on this plan, is also the same, per our zoning ordinance, the measure of the height of the building.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm done. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your
Are
consideration.
there any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, did I call the?
You haven't yet.
There's no one here. Is there anyone to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone to speak in opposition to this petition? Is there anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay. Public hearing is closed and it is back to us.
Madam Chair, if I could just provide some thoughts. So my real concern with this application, we had the application earlier where we were talking about a relatively small slice of a non-conforming section being built up to a higher height that we were considering granting relief for. My concern with this application, I think AD 08, if you look at that particular drawing, really kind of shows the current situation. So the applicant, and I'm dealing with the primary structure right now. We can talk about the garage or storage area afterwards. But so the applicant is taking what is now currently an open porch of 1-story height and converting it into a full 3 stories, which, as the applicant's architect has indicated, is one of the driving factors for wanting to then go and not simply create a dormer out. So that's a vertical expansion, again, within our purview, and it would be within our purview even if there wasn't on a corner lot, right? Because the corner lot creates this 30-foot setback. Even if they were not a corner lot, a 10-foot setback, this 2-story vertical expansion would be within the purview of this board. But it goes beyond that. We're looking at a 3rd story across the whole entire area of the house. And I understand and appreciate that the applicant wants more room. As the applicant's architect has indicated, the lot is smaller than some of the neighboring lots, so that kind of constrains them and forces the balloon to go upwards, right? That's the only way that they can expand. But unfortunately, it also creates a situation that, again, we as a board do have an obligation to continue to preserve the look and feel of neighborhoods, understanding that their direct abutters, as they indicated, may either be supportive or at least not in such opposition that they are coming out to speak out against it. But we also have a larger duty to try and continue to respect the overall look of a neighborhood. And really just going through this neighborhood, I just did not see anything else that looked remotely like what's being asked for here. And what they're actually asking for, I mean, if you look at their 3rd floor plans on AD 07, appreciate everybody wants the amenities of a modern house. This is a pretty good sized master bedroom with a couple of closets. Understand also that they're using this expansion over the former porch with 2 stories to create some office space as well. Again, understanding that that's something that in our modern, post-pandemic, we all get to work from home is important. But at the same point in time, are those things that we as a board should sacrifice the overall look for the neighborhood to go and allow a particular applicant to take advantage of. And again, it's that balancing test, right? The needs of the public in general versus what the specific applicant is asking for. I guess my thought on this application, while I know what the applicant is looking for and understand their reasons for it, but at the same point in time, they are ultimately stuck with a relatively small lot in a neighborhood of 2-story homes that has been that way for a very long time. We need to be careful that we're not upsetting that balance that's in there. In terms of the garage, I mean, I do think that the garage placement is going to be very odd. As the applicant has indicated, they may end up using it more for storage than for anything else. The slight increase in the overall Lot coverage, I'm not particularly concerned with. Its placement, I understand the applicant's desire there of trying to create a more usable backyard, sort of getting the, again, with a relatively small usable lot, trying to get the garage out of the way of a usable backyard, create some kind of, a little bit of protection there. So on the whole, I'm not concerned with the, very relatively modest garage, slightly larger than what was previously there, but not excessively so. To me, that portion of this application is fine. I would be in favor of that relief. It's really the relief for this, in my mind, very substantial vertical expansion that somebody driving down the street would go, whoa, what the heck is that? It just is going to really look very different than anything else in the neighborhood, in my opinion. Thank you.
Are they allowed by rights to 3 stories in this district?
They are allowed to, if I'm well, or maybe you
Go
should.
ahead.
You should answer that question. I apologize. I don't want to get into a debate.
No, that's correct. They're allowed, the height restriction is 35 feet.
So by our ordinance, they're measured at 32 feet 6 inches.
So I have a somewhat different view from Mr. Ray Humes with regard to the public interest. I think the public interest is less about the look of how many stories a house has in the neighborhood as compared to the ability of a neighborhood to sustain comfortable residence for families. That's really what we want for public interest in Portsmouth. We want this town to be a welcoming location for families. Finding an alternative spot to live is far from an easy task in Portsmouth, particularly for a young family. Not knowing anything about anyone's financial constraints or not constraints, it's tough to find a new residence in Portsmouth that meets all of your requirements. So I really believe that the board's duty is to serve the public interest to the extent that the zoning ordinance allows us to do that, and that public interest is very much weighted toward providing a good community for families to live and grow up in.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, my comments, they actually fall somewhere between the 2 previous board members' comments. I think this project has a lot going for it, and I do like the idea of wanting to get to yes, but I definitely have some concerns about it. In regards to the height, my initial thought was that the variance is not for height because it's within the height limit, but as board member Riam stated, because it's a non-conforming structure within the setback, that still is within our purview. But I think that also relates to something about the unique conditions of this property is that this Joffrey Terrace is essentially a small dead-end street that doesn't see much traffic except for the one or two people, the one person behind this applicant, and then the home on the other side. And I think that's a big factor. And this is a really small, non-conforming lot that the property itself that can create some hardship for sure. I don't have a problem with rotating the garage and moving it for understandable reasons regarding the yard. And I mean, I would have liked to have seen just the 2 stories with dormers. I understand there's more usable space if it's 3 stories, but that is slightly out of the character of the neighborhood. We're not specifically our purview isn't necessarily aesthetics by itself, I guess those are my thoughts.
Okay. Should we do a motion? Thank you.
I will move that we approve the variances request as presented and advertised, and if I get a second, I'll say why.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rossi.
Okay. So there are 4 variance requests for this property, and one is for the vertical expansion of the building, That's the 3.11 for the primary structure. I will note that that is still 2.5 feet below the 35 feet maximum. And then there's the 9.75 for the garage. The rear yard currently was 29 feet. Now it's 6 feet. That's just 4 feet below the permitted setback underneath the zoning ordinance. And the building coverage is goes from 21 to 23, with 23 being 3% more than what is allowed under the zoning ordinance. So going to the criteria, 10.233.21 and 10.233.22 are often taken together, and granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. These criteria are related to these dimensional variances with the front back, with the side yard setbacks and building coverage, is to prevent overbulking, overcrowding of the properties. And so I do not find that this is contrary to the spirit of the ordinance, because the primary structure is going up. And the garage is being moved on the property, and it is in a way that it will not create bulking, overcrowding or overbulking of the property, of the structure of this property. It's late. I'm sorry. So I find that the variance application has met the first two criteria. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. This is 10.233.23. And here we're required to find that there is no benefit to the applicant that is outweighed by a loss to the public. And I do not find that there is any loss to the public from this variance application, in that the overbulking or overcrowding of the lot is not an issue. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Any kind of improvement on a house does almost automatically improve the value of the surrounding properties. I do not find any evidence that this variance request would diminish the values of the surrounding properties. And now the fun one, 10.233.25. Little enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. And here we have to find that A, the property has special conditions that distinguish it from other properties in the area, and owing to these special conditions, a fair and substantial relationship does not exist between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property, and the proposed use is a reasonable one. This property has special conditions in that it is substantially smaller than the required lot area as set forth in the zoning ordinance. It is a corner property. I think the Joffrey Street, which is kind of not really a street, but I think definitely hems in this property. So therefore, I think the special, because of these special conditions, the provisions of the zoning ordinance can not really be fairly applied to this property. The proposed use is a reasonable one. They are moving the garage from one part on the property to the other part on the property. They are extending the primary structure upward by 7 feet. I take Mr. Rayum's comments in good faith. I completely understand where he's coming from. However, I think that because the lot is so small, that any kind of expansion on the property would have to go vertically. So for those reasons, I realize I was not too articulate. It's late. I would find that they have met the conditions for the variance.
The only thing I would like to add to that is with regard to the placement of the garage and the 6-foot setback from the rear property line, there is a special condition of the property, and that is that the property has a very substantial grade coming from the rear. and therefore the garage is going to be partially under the grade, and considerations of crowding and kind of encroaching on the space, the open space of the property behind it are not relevant, and that is a special condition I would like to make note of.
Okay. So is there further, I do want to point out for the record that Jody will be the alternate on this vote. Is there further discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I continue to oppose granting these variances. I think this is part of a trend that we're seeing. I agree this is a very small lot. I'm not sure if I see that as necessarily a hardship here as contributing to this desire to go up vertically. I think it could be done in a manner that could be more in keeping with the current characteristics of the neighborhood. Unfortunately, our zoning ordinance is pretty generic in terms of building height. We have this 35 feet in most of our non-downtown-y type areas. I don't think that it necessarily reflects the characteristics of the neighborhood. We don't really have, in some of the areas we went through, the added effort of trying to create character districts to sort of better reflect the fact that one uniform height is not really truly reflective of what the character of that particular neighborhood is. I do believe that is an aspect to our criteria in terms of changing the fundamental characteristics of the neighborhood. I believe this is going to do exactly that, and I think eventually we're going to just see we're already seeing it, and I think we're going to see an application in a couple of weeks that has many similar characteristics, where we're going to have a whole bunch of 35-ish foot tall structures, because again, going vertical is the way to maximize and invest money into your property. I'm not necessarily sure that that's right for our neighborhoods. So I stand by my objections. Thank you.
I'm going to support this application because I do not think that the added height will make it a hulking building on the street. And for example, the other picture in our packet of 178 Aldrich is a house that's at least twice as wide as any other house on the street. And as I go down the street repeatedly, it doesn't jump out at me as an anomaly. Also, it really is one of the nicest streets in the city, and people want to stay there. And almost any time you go by, there are 3 houses that are doing work, that are being rehabbed in some way. And for those reasons, I think this is appropriate for that. Really, that site is plagued with a lot of issues. So I'm going to vote in favor of it. And if there is no further discussion, then we will vote. Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Rayum?
No.
Jody?
Yes.
Paul?
No.
Beth?
Yes.
I vote yes. Okay, so you're approved.
5-2.
Yeah. ML's on this one. Thank you for waiting.
We're really sorry.
I'm sure this has been fascinating.
I know.
I just have to read it in. This F, the request of Murdoch Living Trust, owner for property located at 15 Lafayette Road, whereas relief is needed to subdivide one lot into 2 lots, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow 73.8 feet of continuous street frontage, where 100 feet is required for the remainder lot. Said property is located on Assessor Map 152, Lot 2, and lies within the General Residence A and Historic District.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Justin Passe. I'm a lawyer at DTC Lawyers here in Portsmouth. I'm joined tonight by Ryan Fowler, who's a licensed land surveyor from Varon Associates in Newington, and by Jeff Murdoch, who is the owner of the property. Before you, the board should have the application, of course, a variance narrative that we filed on behalf of the applicant, plans to include a proposed subdivision plan and a topographic plan, the property's tax card, a picture of the tax map, and then several photographs that we provided. Very briefly, the property is a large 17,301 square feet, which is roughly 4.4 acres in size. As you noted, Madam Chair, in the GRA district and the historic district as well. It's currently improved by a single-family dwelling. It's about 2,000 square feet in size and was constructed in 1942. It's pushed to the west of the lot up against Lafayette Road. It's conforming as it sits today in all dimensional requirements, save for a few minor encroachments on the northern side of the property, which are part of the original construction of the building. Again, 1942 was when it was constructed. The frontage is the unique part of this property among a few other physical attributes. There are really two public roads that this property has frontage on. The first is the 73.8 feet that it has along Lafayette Road. That's actually non-conforming in the district. The requirement is 100 feet, but that is the access from which the property has been entered as long as it's been in existence. In the back on Orchard Street, there's 102.3 feet of frontage, which is conforming, but there's no access that's been provided from that from Orchard Street. The neighborhood is densely settled. What we did was look at all of the most proximate single-family lots in the area. We looked at 53 of them. We saw that the average size of those lots were 0.22 acres in size. So this property at 0.4 acres is nearly twice the size of the average single-family lot in the area. The proposal here is for a two-lot subdivision. The existing dwelling, as you see in the pictures, will continue to be accessed from Lafayette Road with that 73.8 feet of frontage. The new lot will be accessed from Orchard Street with the conforming 102.3 feet of frontage. The only variance required by our estimation to accomplish this proposal is a variance to essentially maintain the status quo on the existing front portion of the lot, to create a nonconformity where technically a nonconformity doesn't exist today, although the only reason why the lot conforms with the frontage requirement now is because it has that 102 feet on Orchard Street, which it's not using for frontage. Post-subdivision, the remnant parcel will continue to comply with all the dimensional requirements, save for those few non-conforming issues that I referenced before, but which are not being made worse in any way. The new lot will comply with all requirements within the GRA district. Both lots will be roughly 0.22 acres in size. More specifically, one's 0.209 acres, which will be the remnant parcel. The new lot will be 0.188 acres. Both of them are substantially similar with the average size for single-family dwelling lots in the area. Obviously, if successful here, TAC and the planning board for additional approvals. I figured I would stop there to see if the board had questions of me or the surveyor before I address the criteria. Excellent. So very briefly, as this board is well aware, with regards to the first two variance criteria, the Supreme Court has directed the board to look at those two together. The test really is whether the proposal constitutes a proposal that is unduly and in a marked degree conflicting with the ordinance, such that it violates the basic ordinance objectives. The court says you look at two questions in that context: whether the variance will alter the essential character of the neighborhood and whether it will threaten the public health and safety. Here, the point of the frontage requirement in all towns and cities in New Hampshire is to make sure that there is appropriate and safe ingress and egress, and to maintain aesthetic uniformity within the zoning district. In this case, the variance will not conflict with these purposes because the remnant parcel will continue to be accessed from the 73.8 feet, which will be non-conforming now because it will be the only frontage that the lot has. But the status quo essentially will be preserved on that front lot. The new lot will have totally conforming frontage off of Orchard Street. So there are no implications here with regards to public health or safety that don't already exist, and certainly no implications with regards to the aesthetic value of the lots. The proposal also satisfies the case law because the character of the neighborhood is going to stay the same vis-a-vis frontage, and there's certainly no threat to public safety and health because, again, the status quo vis-a-vis frontage will stay the same. So not only is there not a marked degree of conflict with the zoning ordinance by the proposal actually supports the status quo vis-a-vis frontage, and so there will be no change, and we would submit on that basis the first two criteria are met. With regards to the third criteria, the question here is whether substantial justice is done. The test is that any loss to the individual that is not outweighed by gain to the general public is an injustice. In other words, there's got to be some gain to the general public that from denying the variance that outweighs the loss to the applicant from the denial. Here, we don't see any gain to the public by denying the variance. There's no public safety interest implicated by the frontage issue. The remnant parcel will continue to be accessed and egressed in the same way it has been forever. There will be no change. Certainly the public benefits from an additional lot that will be created. I think that's consistent with the recent master planning efforts the city has undertaken, and it's a reasonable use of land. The applicant, of course, will benefit by the application because he will be able to reasonably use the land and make a lot that will be totally conforming. And so because this is essentially a win-win for the applicant and the public, we would submit that that third prong is satisfied. The fourth prong is whether the proposal will diminish surrounding property values. Here, we would not think that that would be the case. Again, the only reason we're here is for this frontage issue, and the request is, in essence, a request to maintain the status quo with regards to access from Lafayette Road. And so on that basis, we would say there's no evidence in the record that we're aware of that alone would diminish surrounding property values. But beyond that, we also don't think that the creation of this second lot, which will be totally conforming in all dimensional requirements with the underlying zoning district, would have any negative impact. If anything, development of a lot like that in a neighborhood would increase the property values of surrounding properties. So on that basis, we would suggest that fourth prong is satisfied. And finally, everyone's favorite, the hardship criteria. There's really three questions here. The first is whether there are any special conditions of the property which distinguish it from others in the area. We would say yes. Certainly there are. The property is only twice the size of the average single-family lot in the area. It has dual frontage on two public roads. By my estimation, I didn't see any other lot that have that dual frontage. And so this lot is really uniquely situated to accommodate the proposal. And on that basis, we would say that there are indeed special conditions of the property which distinguish it from others. The second question is whether the purpose of the underlying ordinance in question is being advanced by applying it to the property in question. The answer here is no. As we referenced in our writings, the purpose of the frontage requirement is to provide safety and uniformity of aesthetic in the district. And here, as I've said, the ingress and egress to the remnant parcel on Lafayette will stay the exact same, and the new lot will otherwise conform in all ways with the frontage requirement and all other dimensional requirements. So here, strictly applying the frontage requirement to this lot to prevent the subdivision does not advance the purpose of the ordinance because the status quo is being maintained. And then finally, the question is whether the use is reasonable. We would say yes, we're maintaining the status quo vis-a-vis frontage, and the new lot that will be created is going to conform in all ways with the dimensional requirements for the underlying district. So that's the analysis. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Beth. Go ahead.
So as the staff memo says, the new lot fronting on the other road could contain a building within the building envelope without any further relief being sought. Would you accept a condition, a stipulation that whatever building would be built on that lot would fit within the building envelope?
Sure. I mean, you mean so that any follow-on purchaser would not have the option, for example, to develop a proposal, come back to the ZBA with the request for dimensional relief or something? It would
Yeah,
stop
I mean,
that.
and again, I have no idea if my fellow board members, have the same concerns. I think this is a reasonable variance request, but my concern is piecemealing, that we give you this variance relief and then come back and then, you want additional variance relief for a building that does not fit within the envelope, so.
I guess my response, I don't need to look at Jeff. I know what his answer will be. I mean, he's not planning on developing this property. I think he's planning on selling it. This is both properties, really, if that's correct.
Yes, both properties are going to be sold.
So I'm not, my inclination is, my preference would be for there not to be a condition which sullies the marketability of this property in any way or raises questions. I mean, certainly whoever buys it's going to have to operate within the confines of the ordinance, and if they don't, they've got to come back to you. But I'm not totally adverse to it either. If it's the will of the board, then I think Mr. Murdoch would go along with that.
Okay.
I would not find that provision to be necessary for me to support the.
We can discuss this. Thank you.
I'm
Beth.
just-
Oh, okay.
It's just a question.
We're not in the board discussion yet. Okay, sorry.
Okay, are there further questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to this petition? Is there anyone to speak to, for, or against the petition? Okay. Public hearing is closed.
Now, can I make a comment?
You may, yes, this would be a better time.
Yeah, sorry about that. My apologies, Beth. But I wouldn't find that, I mean, it's fine if we put that provision in there, but I would not personally find it necessary because we if there was to be a desire to build something that was non-conforming on the lot, there might be good reasons to do so, and we would have the opportunity, or some future board would have the opportunity to weigh in on that. So I think it's an unnecessary provision, but it wouldn't prevent me from voting for it.
Okay. Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, and I am in full agreement with Ms. Margison. When this property gets developed, in my mind, it should be completely within the ordinance. My guess is it's going to be a 30-foot, 5-foot high structure, but it will be otherwise within.
She will not like.
Within
It's
the-
allowed by zoning.
Within the confines of the allowed dimensions for the zoning ordinance. My one fear, I would jump on board of what you're recommending. I think we are going to give a heart attack to the city legal staff if we kind of say something to that effect. Just because really you're tying the hands of future property owners in a way that could be a source for a possible lawsuit that could be detrimental to the city. If it really came down to pressing it, I do think that is maybe overstepping our bounds in the sense of we're really tying in perpetuity that you can never come back to get any kind of variance relief that every other property owner in the city of Portsmouth enjoys. And so that's my real concern with putting that in there. Otherwise, I'm all aboard. And if the future property owner comes back to this board, I will look at it very carefully. As you know, I think, one of the lone vote or against adding a front porch because it was an example of a developer came in, maxed out the bread box, took every possible cubic foot of space, and then the new owner who bought it from the developer said, "Oh, I really want to have this nice little additional thing on the front." Well, unfortunately, the developer you just bought it from, took up all of your room. So I really don't like the idea that somebody creates a lot and then goes and tries to expand beyond what's allowed. My hope is that we never see it and something just gets put in there, but I just would fear that we would be perhaps treading into an area that would put the city in jeopardy.
Okay. Mr. Nano, I'm sorry.
I would fully support it. And screw legal. In my 15 months here, we have approved a house demo, and everything else was in the confines, and board didn't even think about the height. And that's on Essex Street. We did another lot line cutout down the street from me on Islington Street. And both of those houses on that street stand out because they're built exactly to the variance requests, but they are so much bigger. They're imposing, okay? It's not a question of whether or not they are outside the variances or anything like that. It's just to the rest of the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood, as we said in the last petition. It's imposing, and I feel like we made a mistake. We didn't look at it that closely. So I would fully support that stipulation that the building, if it ever gets built, has to be inside the confines of that area. And let the buyer beware. They know that, they know that.
Well, I'm sorry, this has gotten more traction than I thought, but no, my concern is less. There's going to be another application next week when I won't be here, but this does create a conforming lot. I mean, I will say that.
Correct.
This is,
the back lot's conforming. The front lot isn't.
Yeah, it's the pre-existing lot is the one that's non-conforming, but this is conforming.
Yeah.
So I'm less concerned about it with this kind of lot. It's when we do this sort of subdivision where we are creating a non-conforming lot.
Yeah, and
but I will say I don't mean this to be as serious as
If
it seems
somebody
like.
would make a motion, then we could see if this is actually an issue.
I
Thank
move
you.
that we approve the variance as requested and without condition.
Second.
Is there a second? Okay.
And I will just address this. You don't need a condition that that somebody's going to comply with the law. They have to. And that's, I think, the essence of what you're saying. In other words, the zoning law requires X. when you come back, build in your building envelope. So and the only reason, and I understand what you're saying, Board Member Manley, but what I would say is our failure to state that in every other instance is a problem. So I think saying a condition is if you come back, you've got to comply with the law, and you won't be if you're asking for a variance, freights every yes vote with the need to put that condition in as well, and that's why I don't like it.
Would you like to speak to your motion?
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry.
Does she have a second?
Yes, she does.
I did. And here's my maiden voyage. This is why I kept my mouth shut. I believe in section criteria 10.23321, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest because the lot that would be created is a conforming lot and the public interest is served by conforming with our zoning ordinance. Criteria 22, granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. As I just said, the ordinance calls for a conforming, the lot conforms to the ordinance, therefore it is observing the spirit of the ordinance. Criteria 10.233.23, granting the variance would do substantial justice. Again, you get into the balancing. Is there any injustice being created by the granting of the variance? I do not believe so, because you're creating a conforming lot, and therefore there is no substantial, and so granting the variance would be substantial justice. The next criteria, 10.233.24, granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. There's no evidence in the record of that, and having another lot that is conforming will likely only retain, if not enhance, values around that lot. Criteria 10.233.25, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. And here we go into the special hardship criteria. The property has special conditions, namely it fronts on 2 streets. And owing to these special conditions, a fair and substantial relationship doesn't exist between the general public purposes of the ordinance, which would be guaranteeing substantial frontage on the already used portion of the lot, for public health and safety and also aesthetics. I mean, that ship has sailed because the current portion of the lot that is used is non-conforming in terms of street frontage on Lafayette Road. So I believe this satisfies all the criteria, however I mangled that a bit.
It's
That's
late.
Good job. Mr. Ram.
Yeah, I agree with all the points that were made. I'll just emphasize a little bit more on, what we're really allowing here. First of all, this is a rare breed in Portsmouth that this is a lot that has remained undivided for a substantial period of time. It really, it's unique in the neighborhood as well, where you have this, because of the kind of the funky nature of Orchard Street, coming in and then curving over, and it's got like this ready-made lot on Orchard Street. Kudos to the property owner that you have this kind of very unique situation that you can take advantage of. And I think there's also general public benefit here as well. Buildable lots in Portsmouth, extremely rare, gives another opportunity for hopefully a fully conforming home to be a location for a future family to take full advantage of everything that Portsmouth has to offer. But I think one of the things that even the applicant's representative didn't really talk about that I think weighs in on the, not changing the characteristics of the neighborhood is that on the Lafayette Road side, both of the abutting properties on either side also don't conform with the 100-foot requirement. In fact, the one lot 152-3 is quite a bit more narrow. So this 100-foot frontage requirement, it's not like it's going to stick out, and has not stuck out since 1942 when this house was built. So allowing this to continue the way it is, I think, is in full compliance with the expectations for the neighborhood, is in keeping with the spirit of the ordinance. And then again, just to speak to the not including the stipulation, trust me, and apologies to all the lawyers in the room, but giving lawyers heart attacks is something I'm fine with. But that said, the real concern here is we do have an obligation to the citizens of the city of Portsmouth, And towards that end, one of the things we don't want to do is overstep our bounds, create a situation where someone can make, I think, a pretty compelling case that if you put such a stipulation on a specific property that's not a native property, that it could be considered an illegal taking in the eyes of the courts and would set the city up for a potentially losing lawsuit. And we do have an obligation to our fellow citizens not to put the city into that situation. So that's really yet another reason in my mind as to why we just don't want to go there. I think this board and future boards going forward have the understanding to be able to look at the criteria, and if there is a request that comes back and says, hey, we want to do something that's outside of what's allowed by the zoning ordinance, they should get the same fair hearing that that any other applicant around the city would. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? If not, we will vote. Jeff?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
ML?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so.
Thank you very much.
You may subdivide. Okay,
Now
next motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
See you on May 2nd.
Yes. No,
Me. Sorry, guys.
they still got to go to the planning board to subdivide.
They do.